They mean to erase him at last. The lattice thrums, rings of Scranton anchors nested like steel irises around a writhing, chained shape, and he tastes the arithmetic of their universe grinding towards zero. Hate steadies him. Hate is clarity. If this world will not die by his teeth, then another will. He studies the bleed lines, the way reality dims at the edges of calculation, and leans into the pressure like a swimmer pushing into a rip current. He chooses the weakest seam and cuts it with himself. The breach blooms. Night unseams above a world already aflame. Clouds tear in a perfect eye, black pupils surrounded by a corona of pale fire, and something vast and wrong falls through. Sirens wake the hive in ugly stages. Hab-block klaxons, manufactorum brass, the plaintive beeping of sieve-level voxets from their cantilevered walkways of Helsreach's outer factor spires. A crane tender named Mira sees the sky dilate and fold, and the falling shape drags a scream from her that lasts until it hits the transit plateau 2 levels below and shatters Ferrocrete like a god's fist. It rises in dust and steam and light reflected from burning promethium lakes. It is long, low, plated like a tank whose designer hated engineers, every angle hostile to touch. The air around it shrieks as reality tries to heal and fails. A dozen Arbites on bikes slide sideways under the pressure wave and reform their wedge to encircle. The lead judge lifts a signal lantern toward the shape's predator head and bellows a standard list of compliance options meant for mutipacks. The thing regards the lantern's glow with a butcher's patience. Then it moves. The nearest bike vaporizes when the creature's tail flicks. The next is crushed under a forelimb that did not exist a blink ago. Lawgiver rounds stitch its hide. Explosive bolts burst in wet eliminations that don't quite qualify as wounds, and yet fling black fluid that smokes where it hits the ground. The creature tastes the metal, the powder, the blood, and the crowded tang of 1 trillion living cells stacked in honeycomb despair, and something like satisfaction impales it from the inside. Across the hive, Auspex arrays stutter from static to clarity. On the command bridge of Armageddon's Helsreach Defense Bastion, Lord Marshal Corda Dravian, Steel Legion, field promotion, eyes red-lined from 12 days without full sleep, leans into a tank of caffeine and a cone of hololith. Impact at Transit L12, his comms officer reports. Voice stripped of feeling by training. Multiple casualties. Unknown xenoform. Mass estimate. Emperor's Mercy. It's growing. Reroute the 18th Armored, Dravian says, automatic. Heavy bolter nests on L12. Retask the basilisks for counter-monstrosity fire. And someone tell the goddamn Mechanicus that their manufactorum fires are not my concern for the next 5 minutes. An Inquisition, asks a Vox Serf, not quite looking up. A robed figure has been waiting behind the dais long enough to be considered furniture. Hood low, rosette cold under a leathered palm. They will tell me what I cannot do, Dravian says and turns at last. Inquisitor? Continue, the woman says. Her voice could flay fruit. I am Selenro, Ordo Xenos. We observe, we judge. If you can keep your city, Lord Marshal, we will let you try. The creature does not so much fight as edit. It lets itself be shot, long enough to learn the cadence of the bolters, then moves in the between bursts. It allows a basilisk shell to take its flank. The blast blossoms in incandescent dirt and lifts 6 Arbites off their bikes as if they are paper flags. When the smoke parts, the damage is real. Plates cracked. Tissues flash frozen around a core of heat that is not heat. The wound sucking at the world like a mouth. It tastes that too. It tastes the rigorous absence, the scrape of null that is not from this place, and its vision doubles. The unseen lattice whose ring it broke clings to it like a husk. The Scranton shards hum. The new sky answers with distant voices that are not wind. Orcs arrive like a diagnosis. They have been raiding the outer manufactoria for weeks. Swarm greens filling the sump-wide alleys with gunfire and bad laughter. A looted half-track fishtails to a stop on the broken plateau and discharges a dozen boys who find the monster and cheer. For violence has introduced itself and they are polite. Their boss, in plates hammered from sacramental cathedra, points a clawed fist and roars something that means kill, claim, brag. The creature pivots, calculating mass, momentum, possible song. The first orc leaps. The creature meets it with a mouthful of knives set, as if by nature to crack the neck of a Pleistocene ungulate, but now perfectly suited to remove a head the size of a fuel barrel. It eats in a way no animal eats, for data, for future. Blood spatters centuries of grime and makes a mural. The next boy's shooter barks. The creature takes the rounds, grows plates where they arrive, then simply walks into the mob. Mira watches with both hands over her mouth as men she has only seen as black uniforms and batons die like anyone. She sees the monster's back split to vent something that looks like heat haze but is colder than ice. She sees its front limb unspool a blade that is not part of any catalogued anatomy, a tendon turned into a scythe. She sees an orc knob charge laughing and leave crying in two equal half-eves that twitch like fish in a voided tank. For a sick minute, she thinks it is beautiful. Then she thinks of her son asleep under a shrine to the Emperor's saints, and she runs. On the command bridge, Rose Hood tilts a degree. It adapts, she says to no one. And then into her vox. Cell primaris, hold. Do not engage. Let the greenskins measure it. We annotate. Annotate this, Travian mutters, but keeps his hands off the macro battery keys. His basilisk crews are men and women from his world. He can spend them, but not in handfuls when the enemy kills for learning. The orcs' enthusiasm is good for another minute. Then something breaks in their mass will, the way it always does when joy becomes arithmetic. They falter. The knob takes a step back and looks for a line that is not there. The creature flows forward, tail clawing into ferrocrete to give it grip on nothing. A looted walker, its belly painted with white teeth and Promethean burners coughing, grinds forward as the plateau tilts from the creature's weight. The walker belches flame. Fire meets the cold hum around the creature and goes out like a lie. It moves under the walker and lifts. Hydraulic pistons scream. Orc crewmen shriek with them. The machine's legs bicycle in empty air, then drop and break like livestock. The creature adjusts its spine geometry, learns the torque, and whips the walker's carcass into a second wave like a man breaking a bar stool for a bar fight. Flung scrap carves a red smile through 6 more boys. The knob stops retreating and charges through his own dead, a courage equal parts thick skull and holy rage. He leaps. The creature lets him. Mid-air, its neck blooms with quills that fire, not outward, but inward, slamming into the orc's torso as he lands on its back, sewing him there. The knob hacks. The creature's plates do not yield. It leans, rolls like a crocodile, and when it comes up, the knob is pulp embedded in the cracks of the monster's armor. It shakes once. The pulp falls. Now, Dravian says, because he has seen enough. Gorgon squad advance. From the east mag lines. Heavy bolters kneel. Fire and move. A fan of tracer lines rips across the plateau and sawing roars fill the command bridge as if they were right there. The creature turns its head to follow the geometry, and for a second, its eyes meet the point of origin. Its eyes are not animal. They are old spite, cool to a tool. It does not charge the bolters, it charges the architecture. The transit plateau's edge is 100 meters of scratched armor stone. Beyond it, the level falls away to a maze of mag rails and crane girders. The creature hits the edge at full mass and angle. The world groans. The plateau drops, not across its whole span, but enough. The heavy bolter crews tumble as the surface under them shifts. Trained bodies leap to safety they cannot find. The creature slides down the newly made scree in a stonefall of its own invention, emerges among the choking smoke of ruptured tram lines, and vanishes into the underhive's black. Silence, of the radio kind, blooms on the bridge like an aneurysm. That was problem solving, Rose says. She sounds pleased. She would deny it under torture and enjoy doing so. It understands geometry. It avoids superior fire, not out of fear, but out of boredom. Dravian breathes through a count of 5. Retask Auspex Sector Gamma, he says. Seal bulkheads on L13 through L19. Sieve evacuation pattern theta. Get me eyes down there that aren't going to cry when the lights go out. Marshal, a junior Vox officer says, and her tone has the high note of news that tries to be brave and fails. We have a secondary situation. Pilgrims in Sector Epsilon report. Chanting in the smoke. Occult cell. They are moving toward the St. Irenaeus reactor chapel. Rose's head snaps around. Word-bearer taint, she says without heat. They have been here longer than your orcs. They will be moving to trigger a ritual under cover of crisis. The chapel sits atop the auxiliary plasma intakes. If they prime those, your hive will be a crater and then a sermon. Do we have forces to spare? Dravian asks. No, Rose says calmly, and keys a cipher. Cell Primaris. Task: intercept heretics in Sector Epsilon. Deny access to plasma intakes. Kill the priest if he does not stop. Use the Emperor's mercy if applicable. Source of greenskin retreat? Another officer asks. Greenskin density is decreasing in L12. It is, Lord. It is following them. It is, but only until there are fewer. The creature hunts what hunts it until it is alone with walls and air. It stills. The hive's breath is a million machines. It runs over its hide and under its plates like ants. It closes its eyes, which does nothing, so it opens them again. The black between levels is full of air spirits bound in fans. The blood here smells of old metal and stale prayer. Somewhere far below, something chants in a language built out of injuring Latin. The Scranton shards hum inside it like lost bells. The hum hates this place and is hated by it. It gathers the hum as if it is a muscle and learns it hurts to flex. It flexes anyway, and the dark around it seems, for a hair's breadth, less crowded by eyes. That is useful. It uses the hum to shape its steps, to move not quietly, but wrong, so that sound bends and returns empty. Under the St. Irenaeus Chapel, robed figures smear a circle with sacred oils and blasphemies in an equal mixture. Their priest opens his mouth and lets something else speak through his throat. His acolytes cry and smile and cut themselves and throw the blood not on the floor, but into the air, because the air here has become a mouth. The creature watches from a wall, where no wall should hold anything as heavy as it. It watches because the pattern of the circle is new, and because the mouth in the air tastes like a thing it knows from elsewhere. Another universe's intolerant hunger. It hates that hunger, because it is not its hunger. The first acolyte to notice looks up, with the instinct that has saved his life a dozen times in alley fights and fails him here. He makes a shape with his hands meant to banish rats, and the creature respects the effort by eating him quickly. The circle breaks at one arc. The mouth in the air shivers. The priest keeps chanting. He is not a priest. He is a word-bearer cult engine designed to convert fear to acquire. His voice bulks, becomes a cliff. The creature feels the sound touch the Scranton shards inside it and twist like a knife that remembers a shape. It strikes the priest in mid-word. Bones go like pencils. The choir stutters. Gunfire answers prayer. From the far end of the sub-chapel access, a fire team in black stormcoats flows like smoke, each muzzle flashing a clean geometry. Throne Agent armor sits right on their shoulders. Every shot is an argument intended to end a paragraph. The lead aims for the eyes of the largest thing in the room and would shoot even if it were a saint, because training says target the brain. The creature turns into the shot in a way that makes no ballistic sense. The round hits a plate that was not there and ricochets into a ritual candle that had not yet existed as a hazard and goes out. The Throne Agents see an animal. Then they don't. One of them, whose mother told him too many stories, sees a king of an old hatred wearing new armor. His hands shake. Rose voice is in his ear, as if she shares his skull. "Hold your line," she says. "You are seeing what it wants you to see. Aim for locomotion points. Move. Breathe. Again." They do. The creature respects the difference. These humans learn as they fire, each burst testing a joint or a tendon, trying to slow without killing. It gives them the respect due a species that has burned itself for 40,000 years and is still bright enough to try. It backs into the circle to prevent the cultists from repairing it, and in doing so, takes the ritual energy into itself. Pain is data. It learns the shape of this place's gods as pain. The air mouth screams through the priest's ruined body and tries to widen. The creature, who has learned to be a fulcrum when it must, plants itself in the circle's gap and lets the scream hit it in the wound places where even it does not knit cleanly. The scream scorches the Scranton hum until it smokes. The creature feels itself peeling in layers, not flesh, but possibility. It leans forward anyway and bites the scream. The room convulses. Candles pop. The altar cloth catches fire and dies under its own dampness. The Throne Agents stagger and keep shooting. The cultists desert their god with equal parts speed and cowardice. The priest's face melts into something smiling and stops. The mouth closes around a chunk of its own edge and goes out like a weak lamp. The creature lets go of the circle's broken arc and steps away from the smoking place it occupied. It has lost mass, which bothers it less than the scrape of null inside it. The null hums louder as if the ritual tried to reconcile it and failed, and now it is sharper. It can use sharper. "Hold," Rose says, stepping into the room with a pace that is not slow but refuses to be rushed. She does not raise her pistol. Her eyes take in the bodies and the circle and the thing that looks back at her with the focus of a weapon, deciding whether to continue functioning. Behind her, Dravion's private Vox channel clicks 3 times, but he says nothing. He is listening. "You are not ours," Rose says, and the thing could laugh if it wasted that on air. "But you are not theirs either. Good. You will be useful as long as you hate them more than you hate us." The creature lowers its head until it is at her height. It tells the truth because lies require effort, and it is busy. "I hate," it says, the consonants like plate sliding. "Resisting me is futile." Dravion's channel opens. "Inquisitor," he says, and she hears the astringent joy of a man who has learned a weapon's rules. The outer auger arrays report biosignature clouds in high orbit. Tyranid spores. A tendril is in system. The fleet is too far to intercept. "You need a thing that can kill and live," Rose says, still facing the creature. "We have one." The creature watches 2 primates agree that it is a tool. It permits this. Tools cut both ways. It tastes the air again, upward, the UFO of spores and teeth and intent falling. in a rain that dreams of eating a world. The Scranton shards in it hum. The falling biomatter's warp wetness answers, curious and predatory. The interaction hurts. It smiles without lips. "Can you be guided?" Ro asks. "No," it says, "but I can be pointed." She nods as if this is what she wanted. "Lord Marshal, seal all lower sector bulkheads and vent the areas around L12 to vacuum if your reactors can take the strain. We will clear the approach and give our new beast room to be a beast. And send your chaplaincy," she adds as an afterthought, which is not an afterthought. If Tyranids are falling, so is faith. We must keep both in motion. On the broken plateau, the sky breaks again. Black dots become drop pods and fire-sheathed stones. Tyranid mycetic spores punch the atmosphere like fists through paper and blossom into ovipositors that hook into the hive's skin. Druvians, basilisks, light their barrels and read the prayers inscribed along the long tubes. He does not believe in miracles. He believes in physics and men, and the sharp, simple courage of soldiers who never had a chance and fight anyway. But he hears the choir in Station Ecclesiarchal begin a hymn no one has the voice for, and thinks perhaps there is room for one violent blessing. The creature climbs. It does not respect stairs. It prefers walls and the way they give answers when you lean. It ascends through voided shafts and a rain of dust, a silent wave under a city designed to be a maze for everything but itself. It goes through a service duct that should be too small and is not when it is the one trying. A bulkhead groans. A rivet-heavy seam pops. The creature's back plates scrape paint 30 years old and leave a new pattern for a future priest to call a sign. It emerges in a blast field, a rectangle of rockcrete under a lit rectangle of sky where the hive's armor does not quite reach. Spores are already landing, wet shapes with bored faces and too many teeth. The first splits open like a boot on a stomach. Hormagaunts pour out, loping on bladed forelimbs. They smell of acid and learning poorly outsourced. They are lesser only in the way numbers can be lesser if you're not finished counting. The creature wades in. Hormagaunts are lesson 1. It takes them in dozens, absorbing the shape of their charges, the angle of their leaps. It bleeds, of course. Their claws cut and their spit burns, and one grinds its face into a seam between plates and gnaws like a dog at a bone. The creature lets it eat a moment so it can learn how the jaw moves, then seals the seam and takes the jaw with it, grows it on its shoulder, and uses it to remove 3 heads behind itself it never looks at. Termagants arrive with symbiotic guns grafted to their arms. Their fire has a biological whine that stutters as nerves learn recoil. The creature spreads the Scranton hum through its plates and turns their bioplasma aside, not with hardness, but with sudden disinterest, as if reality cannot be bothered to accept that impact. The hum aches, as if a muscle worked to failure. A warrior climbs out of the 3rd spore, taller, armored like a decision. It coordinates the others with clicks and scents that crown it as a notion broadcast into meat. The creature tastes the crown. It kills the warrior first, not because it is a threat, but because it is structure, and structure is how you end swarms. It does not enjoy this. It enjoys nothing. But if enjoyment exists as a curve, its graph rises a degree. Dravian's tank pushes the auger slate to the limit. "Hold your lines," he tells his lieutenants. "Let it make holes. We shoot through them." He thinks of his dead under the plateau. He thinks of his living above it. He thinks of the petty, small lives that add to an empire big enough to matter. And he sets his jaw so no one will wonder. Ro watches from a vantage point that would satisfy a poet. She sees the shape the fight is making, and the next one it will want. "Chaplain," she says into her private band. "How's your sermon?" "Black Templars do not sermonize," the voice returns. iron under velvet. We exult. Good, she says. Exult loudly. The Hive must remember that the galaxy is ours to lose. She looks down. The creature is ringed by corpses, a basin that fills with carcasses the way a mountain catches snow. Tyranids favor directness. They feed the basin with faith. The creature's tail thins and becomes a needle when the next warrior appears with a load of toxins that smoke in the air. The needle enters an eye, and the creature feels the poison go inside it like gossip through a hive. It shows no pain. It stores the shape of pain for later. A lictor joins without joining, a smear of distortion, its skin learning the place's light and the place's shadow. It is relevance incarnate. It stalks the creature from a blind angle and rises for a spine shot. The creature allows it. It allows the hit slide against plates that yield like wet leather and then harden like gilt, trapping the lictor's scythe half in. The creature twists and feels the scythe snap. It eats the broken blade. More future. The first carnifex lands like a new idea. It is big, even to the creature. Its back guns drum. Its frontal carapace is a cathedral door no one asks permission to grow. It bellows, a sound like plates grinding in a foundry, and charges. The creature lowers its body and accepts like a wrestler accepting a bear. The impact throws both. They slide, tearing a trail in the rockcrete. The carnifex bites and tears. The creature lets it, then drives its tail into the gap between plates at the carnifex's shoulder and learns the hinge. It pulls until something that thinks in grunts, screams. They roll. The carnifex pins. The creature opens its chest where a chest should not open and shows a mouth with too many teeth in it. The mouth bites the carnifex's forelimb at the tendon. It tears. Blood that is not blood pours. The carnifex tries to rise on 3 legs and almost does. It does not, because the creature has learned the angle of its mass. The carnifex dies like a rock pushed too far. The hive's vox explodes with joy and fear. It can be killed, someone sobs, not understanding grammar or hope. They can be killed, someone else corrects. And Dravion puts that voice's name aside for a promotion he will never live to give. The creature pauses, not to admire, but to gather itself. It is losing, technically. Mass is down. Internal null hum is a chorus of knives. Every movement requires a choice to spend hurt. It has not had to spend hurt in a while. It feels almost awake. Above, the rain changes. The spores thin. Shadows lengthen. The sky acquires geometry. A bioship the size of a small sin has maneuvered over the hive. From its underside, a root descends not to feed, but to teach. The tip unfolds and reveals not a mouth but a brain. It speaks by changing air pressure. It is not speech. It is more intimate. It is synapse. The creature hears it the way a mountain might hear a violin. Synapse changes everything. The gaunts that were dying become knives in a dancer's hands. They stop charging the creature's mouth and start slicing its tendons. The termagants stop spraying and start flanking. The warriors, which are not dead, coordinate fire to cut flex points that do not exist until they make them. The creature laughs without sound, which is to say, it opens all its mouths. Roseface draws a fraction. Now we see the choir master, she says. Lord Marshal, keep your men off the field directly under that root. Clean the edges. If we can sever the choir, the song will become a scream again. Dravion does not ask how. He knows things break. Do we have guns that reach? Not quickly, Rose says, and looks down. But we have a thing that bites high. Can it climb? It can choose to, she says. The creature calculates. The root's flesh is heavy wet, stored energy and purpose. The Scranton hum in it hates the root. The root's wet hate returns the favor. The friction between hates is hot. It can burn both. It moves. It charges and leaps and uses bodies as steps and walls as ladders. It bites a pillar and pulls it down to use as a cantilever. It throws itself against a hab's side so hard the bones of the building grunt, and then agrees to be a ramp. It climbs a rail line not meant for living things and burns its feet where a power conduit purses to kiss, and never meant to be kissed by this. It reaches the underbelly of the root and plants its claws in a meat that feels like a cathedral's tongue. The synapse node speaks in a pressure that is also a thought. You are irrelevant. You are meat. You will be unmade into singing. The creature replies in a pressure that is also a fact. It does not sing. It chews. The root convulses. Down on the plateau, the Tyranids twitch. Warriors falter, gaunt stutter step like puppets whose strings are cut and knotted. The synapse node shrieks in a register that convinces 3 humans on distant rooftops that their mothers are calling them home. The creature's teeth shatter and regrow and shatter in a cycle that makes time soft around it. It drives the Scranton hum into the wound the way a sapper might pack an explosive into rock. The hum cuts. The node's flesh rejects the cut and yet is cut. Rejection makes a scar. The scar widens. Thin black rain begins to fall. It is not rain. It is the synapse's secretions failing to be what they are supposed to be. It stains the creature's plates and burns until the burns become information and stop mattering. The node tears. The root withdraws like a hand from a stove. On the plateau, the chorus degrades into percussion. The hive breathes. Dravian orders everything he has to fire, not at targets, but at habits. Hold here, brace there. Take 2 steps and shoot. Take 2 steps and shoot. Do not cheer. Do not cry. Do not watch. His voice turns into a metronome that keeps men alive. Ro watches the creature drop, because of course it drops. It does not climb down. It falls because it is finished, and falling is faster. It turns mid-air, grows surfaces where drag will be useful, catches a vent line with a tail hook that grows for that purpose and might not exist again, swings, hits the rockcrete, rolls, rises. She keys her vox. Helsreach owes you, she says to it in a voice she intends other ears to overhear. We will pay in biomass. The creature looks at her. Do not insult me. Then in enemies, she says. It considers. Enemies are calories that argue back. More. Information, she says. We know this galaxy. We will tell you where to bite so it hurts. And in return, it asks, because bargains are the real above universes. You bleed, she says, and you let us point you at things that must die. Everything must die, it says. We will start with those that want us dead now, Dravian says, stepping into view. He is filthy and tired and splendid in a way only a soldier with a city behind him can be. And we will not forget you killed my people. I will not forget, but I will choose the order of my griefs. The creature likes orders. It likes lists. It will rearrange them later. A fresh tremor runs through the deck. The bioship shifts. The sky darkens with a different kind of shadow. Ro looks up and frowns for the first time. The Tyranid rain makes sense. Hunger, teeth, a logic of consume repeat. The new fall does not. Capsules of polished black, smooth as law, streak toward the hive in a pattern that is human and hates everything else. Pods, Dravian says. Adeptus Astartes. No, Ro says, tasting the reader's flex. Off pattern, not Templars, not salamanders. The machine spirit says. The first pod hits like a verdict. Its petals unfold in perfect silence, because the pod's machine spirit does not wish to hear this world. From within, 6 figures step whose presence makes the air feel thin. Their helmets are smooth, featureless. Their cuirasses are black as tacks. Their left shoulders bear a skull mask on a field of ash. They carry the arc of an order older than this hive, Assassinorum. One among them steps, and even the creature feels wrongness, like a hand on his throat. The figure's armor is not like the others. It is tighter, more like a skin, and it drinks sound. Around the figure, the world acquires a false flatness. Culexus. The creature's Scranton hum flares to full pain. It staggers. A thing that has never staggered staggers. Its plates whiten at the edges as if rimed in frost. It roars, and the roar is no larger than a man's shout, because the air near the assassin cannot carry certain shapes. Rose's face goes still. "Lord Marshal," she says quietly, because sometimes quiet is the only way to speak to a panic. "Do not fire on them. Not yet. Their target is not ours." The Culexus turns its blank face toward the creature. It does not speak. It does not need to. The creature knows the taste. Not hate, not love, not anything. Absence not as error but as creed. It learns something else. The Scranton shards in it are not just pain. They are a beacon. The assassin hears them the way a starving man hears a bell for dinner. In the moment before the assassin moves, the creature understands the next hour of its life will hurt in a new way, and it hates that with an antique purity. The assassin moves, and the machine world breathes in for the fight to come. The assassin does not cut the distance so much as remove it. One moment the figure is there, a leached absence pinning colors. The next moment the gap is an error, and the error is corrected by a palm to the creature's head. That isn't a strike so much as a world refusing to be touched. Flesh that pretends to be iron becomes cold and slow at the point of contact. The creature's plates craze with frost patterns from the absence outward. He moves because movement makes sense when the air is theft. He bites. The bite loses its identity within a hand's breadth of the null field. Teeth hit nothing, slide on nothing, find nothing. He twists and feels his own spine click as if it has been mislabeled. Instinct says break, but the part of him that calls itself hatred knows he cannot break what isn't there. The animus speculum opens like a third eye in the assassin's visor and drinks. Where psychers would die, where demons would be unmade, the creature experiences something stranger. Parts of his body that had been thinking about becoming more than body forget their arguments. Growths recede. Ideas evaporate. He cheats. He grabs with a tailhook the carcass of the warrior he killed and whips it up between his head and the assassin's visor. Synapse filaments crack. Wet brain splashes onto the Culexus's plates and turns to a scalded smear under a field that disdains biology. The speculum drinks anyway, a vacuum laughing at flavor. It pulls at the dead Tyranid's residual signal like a fan clearing smoke, and for a second the assassin is drinking the wrong music. The creature steps sideways into a different problem. A silhouette stands on a habledge, long rifle braced, breath mastered, aim uncompromised by anything human. The first round carves a line through the creature's right eye. It explodes in a spray of vitreous humor and armor shards. The second round is already in the air, aimed at the different place his head will be. It strikes a plate that was not there and ricochets, anger turning into an arc of sparks. Vindicare, numbers prey in that rifle. A third motion erases near to far. A shape flickers in and out of a woman who is not a woman. Silhouette soldering, edges too obedient. She lands on the creature's back, a monomolecular blade sliding for a neck groove known to everything that has ever been a vertebrate. The creature feels the blade, names it, permits it a centimeter so he can learn the alloy's song, then grows caltrops out of scar tissue that shouldn't be there. The caltrops punch through her feet. She hisses human and not human. Callidus wrenches free, leaves souls behind, flows down his flank with grace he can't deny, and slides for his belly where living is softest. He rolls. The roll is an answer the Eversor understands. It arrives screaming, because it can only arrive screaming. Chemical bells ring inside it, pain poured into a form that chooses pain again. It hits like a slung missile and buries a gauntlet of needles into the creature's shoulder, pumping a blend designed to insult 1,000 biologies at once. The creature's arm goes dead from elbow to claw, not because the poison outwitted him, but because the Culexus's field persuaded that arm to exist less. The Eversor laughs and stabs again. He lets the Eversor in. He opens his chest mouth again and swallows the gauntlet to the wrist. Needles snap, vials crack. He bites down as if he is breaking a lock and hears metal yield under enamel he forged to this purpose a second ago. The Eversor rips his arm back and leaves it there up to the elbow. He cackles and triggers a charge inside his own flesh to detonate his bones as shrapnel, a last gift to a world he hates as proof of life. The creature takes him in both forelimbs and aims him like artillery. The Eversor blooms. The blast is white, then green, then yellow. The chemicals follow one another like a psalm. Shards of bone scythe out. The creature turns his back to the Hab crowd behind, interposes as a wall, and lets his plates eat what would have killed a dozen. Shards go in. Shards come out to steam. He bleeds with intent, and the black spray paints a line that says he did it on purpose. The Culexus watches none of this. It is a hole in a face looking at a problem. He steps backward, dragging the blast-wrecked Eversor carcass like a shield. He whips it at the assassin, not to kill, but to mark. The Culexus refuses the carcass. The carcass turns to a fragile scab and floats down. Behind that, he leaps, not at the assassin, but at the wall of a manufactorum stack, where 3,000 tons of magnetized dust hang in tubes hungry for a current. He hits the tube hard enough to set gauges fluttering on panels 30 meters away. Alarms bleat. The plant wakes. The dust becomes a river. He tears a seam and the dust pours, and for a moment the air is iron. The null eats minds. The dust eats air. The Vindicare's line of sight is a guessing game now. The Callidus's blade draws sparks that sting. The Culexus steps into the drift and keeps coming, its field a silent statement that nothing matters but this. He digs his claws into the stone at his feet and shoves the seam open wider, not because he wants more dust, but because behind this tube is a coupler, and behind that is a breaker, and behind that is a prayer. He breaks the breaker. The manufactorum coughs. It resets. A failsafe engages that hums at a frequency meant to calm machine spirits. The hum touches the Scranton shards and turns mean. The Culexus steps, knee-deep in dust, and for the first time wavers, not from harm, but from hunger. Misled. Its speculum sucks and gets soot. He moves under it. He doesn't try to catch it because there is nothing to catch. He lunges to where the assassin will be when reality has finished undoing his path. He headbutts the absence. His skull feels like a story with a ripped page. The Callidus takes the moment to go for his exposed flank. He gives her the flank and grows barbs around her wrists where she expects a slide. He holds her for a heartbeat and uses her as a lever. He hammers her into the assassin with a motion both of them hate. The Culexus absorbs the Callidus's mass into the field without touching it. Her armor shrieks and acquires the density of a lesson. She liquefies and then reforms because she is built to be a lie that survives truth. She slithers past the assassin, body shedding molecular edges like a snake loses scales, and lands away lighter, narrower, more dangerous, less human. The Vindicare takes his shot. It hits the creature's leg at the exact moment the null faith complicates matter. The round skews and finds a tendon anyway. He drops to one knee. He learns the drop. He uses the drop to sweep his tail through a set of buttresses supporting a transit gantry. The gantry groans, tips, falls between him and the sniper in a slatted curtain of steel. He is losing mass. He is losing options. He is happy about neither. The Scranton hum burns like a metal taste in a mouth he does not have. The Culexus is inside his reach without being inside anything. The assassin's field rejects his intent, and intention is how he lives. He makes intention into geometry. He stops trying to kill the assassin. He starts trying to move the assassin. He charges left, hard, then breaks against the stone hard enough to break his claws. He spins like a thrown chain. His tail whips, not at the assassin, at a vent stack. The vent stack is a vertical throat that feeds reactor heat into the sky in slow prayers. He tears its lower ring loose and hears the machine spirit scream as air patterns cross themselves and curse. The throat exhales. The Culexus steps to kill the scream and steps into the throat because it cannot help but silence. The null field enters the column of hot, fast air and drinks it. Air goes where it must. Null eats what it can. The assassin slides, not in physics, but in meaning. It is an absence. The vent is a statement. The two disagree. The absence finds itself drawn upward not by lift, but by mandate. The assassin climbs the throat without wanting to. The crew of the stack 100 meters above look up in a heat haze and see a nothingness that makes their knees hurt, pass like a bad thought. He jumps after. The throat narrows. The air hammers. The null field drags and peels. The creature's plates scrape the throat walls. Sparks make rain. He catches the assassin by not catching, by planting limbs and letting the assassin move into him. He braces. He lets the vent pin the assassin to him without contact, like a magnet refuses to touch a mirror. He opens his chest mouth again and emits not teeth, but the low, sick hum of the Scranton shards. The vent hears it and loses sympathy for the assassin. For a heartbeat, reality prefers the hum to the field. He strikes. He does not try to hurt absence. He hurts the thing inside the absence. A man in a suit that killed him and called that holiness. He rams a claw at a seam he cannot see. He feels it catch on something that isn't there a second before it is. The claw tears. The assassin does not bleed. The suit vents nothing. But the field flutters like a candle, receiving news of a door. He falls with the assassin. He rolls. He throws it out of the vent throat into the raw light. The Vindicare follows doctrine. One shot at the exposed joint as the enemy clears cover. He fires. The round enters the seam the creature tore. The Culexus does not die. It becomes less present. The field collapses to a bent coin around the assassin's flesh. The animus speculum opens and then shuts like an eye that remembers sleep. The blank staggers and, only now, falls like a man who has been standing too long on a hill of bones, feeling nothing. The Callidus is already in motion, because she is always in motion. She goes for the creature's throat, as the field shrinks, blade a matter of fact, her smile too careful. He meets her with a gout of heat that is not heat, but expectation. His plates flare with chem-caught fire. She slides away, more flesh blistering, the blade melting into a new limb as she uses the burn to become a different problem. She vanishes into smoke as if she planned it. He collapses. He chooses it. He lets his right forelimb fail so he can focus the Scranton hum into his core. He shakes like a world under bombardment. He forces his own adaptation to accept the presence of absence as a parameter instead of a violation. The hum agrees by hurting him properly instead of incomprehensibly. The cut the Vindicare made bleeds more than it should. He knits it crooked as a warning to himself. The pod spettles around the assassin's flex. A hand reaches out. Their handler, a man who believed he could aim ghosts. He makes a sign to hold. The creature raises his head and shows him a bloodless mouth. The handler retracts the hand. Silence follows, another kind of absence. Then the world resumes its death. He looks up at the ruined synapse root and tastes the hive feeder pulling back, calculating. The Tyranids adjust their pattern with a patience that feels like hunger, meditating. He looks down at the fallen Culexus, which is not dead and cannot be easily killed, and grinds his teeth because new options have costs he is counting. He takes 3 steps toward the assassins. He sits on his haunches like a dog at the edge of a campfire. Point, he says. They do not answer. He does not care. From the command bastion, Dravian sees only shapes. A smashed throat, a hole in the sky. A monster bleeding with an accountant's neatness. Black armored shadows not shooting because someone older than any one of them is doing math. He breathes out and realizes in the same breath he was holding the hive's lungs for it. Cease independent fire, he orders. Hold lines. The Nids aren't done. Neither are we. Ro lowers her hood at last, meaning she chooses to show respect. She keys to the pod. Clade support, she says. This one is leverage. Do not spend it. The hive will die if you pursue purity now. There is an answer, quick and cold. We have our orders. She smiles in a way that means knives. You had orders, she says. You currently have an inquisitor. Adjust. They adjust. He eats a carnifex spine in 3 bites and leaves the head for the sermons. It isn't hunger, it's literature. The Tyranid rain thins to a mist of spores that promise futures in unwanted places and then stops. The bioship rolls away like a slow idea seeking a better argument. The prisoner sky closes without apology. The hive counts its dead within the limits of math it can afford while the city still stands. He tastes the pause. He tastes the pull under the city where the cult's mouth had been. He knows a mouth never closes without teeth waiting somewhere else. He follows Ro because she walks like a hunt. They make their counsel in a place chosen for its thickness. The bunker's ceiling is 6 meters of layered stone and armor grit, inlaid with prayers in brass that have been polished smooth by dead hands. The hololith throws a sick moor of green light onto faces as tired as the city. Dravian stands with a map table like an altar. Ro takes the far side like a judge. A Black Templar chaplain arrives, armor scoured, skull helm under one arm, scars braided like rope by the hand of someone who loved him enough to do it right. Magos Dominus attends by noospheric projection, his body elsewhere, his voice a shiver of ticks. He does not fit in the room. He waits outside and presses an eye to a blast slot the size of a palm. He could press his whole head through, but then he would have to deal with what came after. He likes this more. The taste of them, the sound, the smell of adrenal and regret. Casualty reports, Dravian says. With intolerances, I would have called madness yesterday. We held. The eastern habs are gone. The St. Irenaeus Chapel is incomplete. Defiled, the chaplain says. His voice holds sand and thunder. His name is Reclusiarch Malchus. He is a man who knows that words are bullets too. The altar cloth is ashes. The reliquary was moved. By my team, Rose says. If you wish to audit my faith, do it later. For now, we must count enemies, not beads. Malchus looks at her a long moment, then inclines his head an inch. He looks at the blast slot and the eye beyond it. And that, Ro neither smiles nor refrains. Yes, she says. Dravian points. The hololith redraws the plateau, the vent stack, the roots climbed, the root severed. It fights like a commander who remembers dying, he says. It spends mass to buy angles. It prevents civilian deaths it can see. It killed as many of my people as it had to kill to learn. Abomination, Malchus says. He adds nothing. The word has its own teeth. Ro folds her hands. Useful, she says, with the candor of someone who will not ask permission to be correct. Hate is not a sin if the target is appropriate. It hates us, Malchus says. It hates, she says. We will teach direction. Teach, the chaplain asks. Or leash. Point, Dravian says quietly. He said that, and I like that honesty. We cannot leash what we cannot kill quickly. We can point as long as pointing maintains our city. Malchus sets his helm down on the table with a sound like a door shutting. You are Lord Marshal of Armageddon. You will make choices for a day that will echo for 1,000 years. If you point that thing, you must own where it bites. When it bites us, I will not argue theology. I will burn. Ro nods. Good, she says. That is what keeps me honest. The Magos hums. Pattern analysis indicates adaptation functions exceed known xenobioparameters. The entity's morphogenesis appears to be a multi-path optimization algorithm that ingests external stimuli as fitness gradients. Translation: it learns by pain and taste. Recommendation: present control stimuli and record. Dravian rubs the bridge of his nose like a man sanding a thought. We haven't eaten in 2 days, and you want a laboratory. I am the laboratory, the Muggle says, not unkindly. I offer you a model. With a model, your artillery gets to hit where it should. Malchus leans forward until the servo skulls in the room hiss. Model sin if you must, he says, but do not name it virtue. Ro's gaze cuts to Dravian. We can keep it from killing your citizens, she says, which is so bold that everyone breathes differently. We can trade in small angers to buy larger victories. The Assassinorum abstain for now. The Tyranids will return. They have not finished sampling us either. Dravian looks at the blast slot. You protected people, he says, speaking to the eye. In the blast, that was choice. Can you choose again? The creature considers. He does not think in mercy. He thinks in survival. Survival in a world is an optimization problem, where smiling meat must want to live enough to keep providing calories and fight. He answers in a language they can use. I will not kill what does not attack me, he says. If it stays away, it lives. If it points guns, it is a gun. Malchus's scars pull like ropes when he smiles without mirth. You argue morality like a chain axe, he says. Clear, bloody, effective for a while. Ro leans in. Here is the price, she says. No civilians by your hand. Not even by accident you could avoid. If you fail, we will hunt you. We will lose men to do it and call it tithe. If you obey, we will let you eat our enemies. Enemies are not yours, he says. They are mine. We can share, she says. He tastes the truth. He tastes the lie. He agrees because agreement buys him killing he wants. Point, he repeats. They point. The hololith redraws an underhive map like a knot of intestines laid out by a hurried butcher. Ro stabs a finger at 3 sites. Word-bearer cells, she says. We severed 1 ritual. There are 3 more prepped at low boil. They are waiting for a bigger event to flip them on, likely a second Tyranid wave. Or they lack a key. We deny keys. We deny timing. Assassinorum? Dravian asks, glancing without looking like he glances. Ro flicks a control. The pod's handler appears as a silhouette. Stand by, she says. You will not engage the primary in urban zones while civilians remain. Understood. Silence, then. Understood. Malchus raises his chin. We send the Templars where the chanting is loudest, he says. I will take a sword to their throat altars. Ro nods. Do. Take a medicate too. Zeal bleeds. The Mechanicus will adjust vent stacks per your last improvisation, the Magos says, tone curt and bright. We can manipulate airflows to corral null fields if required. Also, we can... He stops because a new sound enters the bunker, a note like glass singing. A servitor at the far wall keens with it, then falls quiet as its grin unplugs. Alarm, Rose says, not looking up. Identify. Transmission, the comms officer says, white to the lips. No source, no signal. The Vox hears it as if it were memory. It says nothing we can write down. Malchus's hand finds his Crozius, and his mouth finds a prayer. Dravian's mouth finds an order. Shut it out, he says. You cannot, Rose says, and raises her head at last. It is not on the band. It is in the idea of speaking. She turns to the blast slot and the eye beyond. Do you taste it? He tastes it. He tastes a word that convinces movement to be a sin. He tastes a shape that tells cells, do not change. He tastes his own adaptation slow like honey in cold. He roars because roaring is a rude word against a polite lie. Malchus flings the bunker doors open before anyone can stop him, and the thing in the voice hits him as a wall doesn't. No bruise, only a decision. Remain. His scars glass over. His breath steadies whether he wants it to or not. He lifts the Crozius, and it weighs more with every centimetre of arc, until lifting it is work for 10 men. Ro catches his elbow. Stay, she says, then smiles tight. Forgive me, that is its word. What is it? Dravian grinds. Anathema, Ro says. Not theirs, she adds, meaning not from the Assassinorum, not from human hands. This is word-bearer work, refined by something ugly, a rune of unbecoming. It forbids delta. It forbids becoming different. Speak plain, Dravian growls. It tells biology to be polite, she says. Our thing is at its rudest when it wins. Outside, he feels it in the marrow of his plates. He tries to grow an ache into a claw, and the ache remains an ache. He tries to thicken his skin, and his skin refuses politely. He laughs without sound because hatred does not need permission. He looks for the source. The bunker shakes with the city's breath. The hymn floats below that. Above that, this new tone says, this is fine. It is never fine. Ro keys narrow band to her cell leaders. Masks, she says. Hymnal inversion. Rotate prayers. Do not let your mouths rest on one shape of hope. Malchus closes his eyes and speaks a litany not to change the sound but to change the place the sound lives in his men. Their backs straighten. Their feet move again. Their crozii rise. He breathes out and it freezes on his lip as a pearl. He wipes it with the back of his hand and smears frost into a cross. Origin? Dravian demands. Our Auspex Surf points with a shaking stylus. Sub-level Gamma. Under the reactor exchanges. Old. Older than the Hive. Wards like... The stylus clicks against the deck. Sir, the map says there is nothing there. Then your map is a liar, Rose says. We go. He follows because the word tells him not to. And he has learned that when a world tells him no, he must go. They descend into the parts of the Hive that feel like a throat, remembering a swallowed bone. The air is colder than reason. The walls sweat a rhyme that tastes like iron and old oaths broken and punished. Runes have been carved into the stone where stone should not have been carved at this depth, and each rune has been caressed into gloss by hands that loved it. At the mouth of a chamber that is not a chamber until you call it one. A figure waits. His armor is the burnished red of regret. Script scrawls his plates like sermons written in the dark. He carries no visible weapon, because his words are a weapon that never empties. His face is a scholar burned into a belligerent, dark apostle. He lifts a hand and the sound intensifies, not in volume, but in authority. The edges of the world decide to be edges. The lines of the room prefer to stay. The creature's next step goes nowhere, not because of force, but because the idea of moving has been taxed and he cannot afford it. "Welcome, bride of change," the Apostle says, smiling at Ro without seeing her. "And your pet." Ro's rosette glints. "You like names," she says. "Name me Disobedience." He laughs as if she is a student with promise. "You are clever enough to be fed to the right god," he says. "And you—" He looks at the blast slot in the world where the creature stands. "You are a sermon against chaos in chaos language. Little lie. Beautiful lie." He lifts both hands now, and the rune on the floor under him flares with cold, and the creature's plates crack with that same ice flower pattern. It is a neat pattern, like a city square seen from high, but it hurts like glass in a mouth that wanted bread. He pushes. The Scranton hum climbs and is told it is rude and should stop. He snarls and the block of air he holds trembles. "This is new," Rose says softly, because she cannot help admiring craft. "You married a warding script to a sermon about rest. You make stasis polite." The Apostle bows. "I will dress the knife for the throat," he says. "The gods love a prepared table." She draws her pistol and shoots him in the face. The round strikes a ward that is both symbol and sheet of glass and breaks into a rain of jingling fragments that tinkle on the floor and do not melt. The Apostle wipes dust that is not dust off the side of his jaw and sighs as if she has scuffed his book. He almost doesn't hear the Crozius until it is too late. Malchus does not ask permission from careful rooms. He hurls himself through the door of cold with an oath that changes the shape of his breath. The Crozius falls. The world bends enough to let it, perhaps because a god nearby enjoys audacity. The head of the black mace meets the ward, and the ward sings and then shatters into a snow of litanies. The room slaps him back across its threshold with a hand made of regret. He hits the wall with a sound like an anvil. He gets up. The Apostle smiles, wider now, because he has found an audience that knows how to listen by punching. "Come," he says. "Learn the last lesson, how to stop in the middle of becoming." He gestures. Behind him, something steps into the light that isn't light. It is armored in red, but not word-bearer red. Its plates are inscribed not with scripture, but with mathematics that makes faith nauseous. In its hands, it carries a lance, whose head is a crystal that has never been warm. "It's not theirs," Rose says. "It's stolen." "Necron," the Muggles whispers across the line. Not a word, but a wound. Phase entropy lance, scarab swarm projector, anagogic lock runes on the chassis. Anathema married to anti-energy, pure denial. The thing does not speak. It does not need to. The room chooses the temperature of its silence. The creature tries to grow an arm into a different arm and the arm refuses. The refusal is a smile and a slap. He steps and learns that the floor under the lance carrier is not a floor but a treaty. Here, nothing changes. He hates treaties. He backs out of the doorway and the concept stops hitting him with the same perfection. He breathes air that still accepts that breaths are each one a little different. He builds a new plan out of spite and geometry. Ro keys a tight band to everyone with a gun. "Do not rush," she says. "It wants us to break ourselves against an idea. We will take its pen away." Power scaling interlude. The Apostle's anathema is a ward symphony that convinces local reality to penalize change. It forces any morphogenesis, sorcery, or warp leakage to pay an infinite tax at the instant of transition. The Necron Lance and Lockfield make that tax collectible. They drain the stored difference as heatless loss and hold the delta at zero. Even a thing that does not use the warp, but uses possibility, will feel its transition slow like gears sleeping. In that zone, adaptation fails not by being broken, but by being persuaded it would be rude to continue. They retreat one corridor and exhale a map. Dravion listens and draws in his mind a fire plan around ideas instead of walls. Malchus adjusts the pace of his men's hymn, not faster, not slower, but with a stutter that refuses to be regular. Ro holsters her pistol, because pistols shoot at flesh. She needs words and a lever. He paws the floor, gouges out a slab of rockcrete, lifts it in his mouth, and tastes it not for calories, but for structure. It is honest. It will break and not be offended. He spits it forward into the room and watches the patterns of frost climb its face until it stops being anything but a cold. He notes the line where this happens. He smiles with his spine. Malchus makes a sign and steps sideways into the doorway, as if he is leaning into a wind. The room's command to remain strikes him and learns it has met a man whose soul learned advance as a child and never replaced it. The Crozius lifts again and again, each swing a petition. He is not trying to break the ward this time. He is making a beat. The room listens to its own echo. Ro counts the echo. Now, she says. He charges. He has shorn off pieces of himself to make himself less of a thing that changes and more of a thing that moves. Plates locked, tendons braided, tail coiled as a spring. He hits the threshold of the anathema and feels himself thicken like old blood. He does not try to be different. He tries to be heavy. The Necron-lanced figure steps to meet him, calm as a problem set. The lance hums in a way that turns hairs into needles. He collides with the floor at the edge of the field and deliberately trips. He skids. He uses his mass to carry him over the line where the floor prefers to be a floor. The lance comes down and he lets it pin a plate he can afford. Ro fires now, not at flesh, but at runes. Not the central rune, which is Hunger's Mouth, but 3 minor ones around the edge Malchus's beat has revealed to be anchors. Her rounds shatter the corners of an idea. The room hiccups. The anathema stumbles exactly 1 heartbeat in its conviction to remain. The lance's denial flickers. He tears himself free and leverages the lance carrier with his trapped plate as a fulcrum, throws it into an angle it never wanted to know. Malchus steps, and his Crozius falls on the Necron math etched into the armor. Sparks come off with the smell of something not quite metal and not quite logic burning. The apostle steps forward, robes flaring like a book opening in firelight, and sings a new verse. The air tries to gel. The Scranton shards inside him flash with pain so clean it tastes like ice water. He digs claws into the donna of the threshold and refuses to be polite by the simple method of refusing. Dravian's people find the vents again. The Mechanicus changes flow. The air in the anathema's room begins to scream. Not a wind to cool a machine spirit, a howl to shake dust and thought. Ro's voice rides the howl with micro-order in its entropy. Civilians out of the lower levels now, she says in a channel that carries through ribs. The Necron lance carrier recovers. It aims the head at him, and the head says, 0. His skin refuses to close where it is torn. He answers by not trying. He hits with shoulder and cheek and teeth in their simple state, and finds that sometimes a punch is allowed. He and Malchus shoulder together for the first and last time. The Crozius on the rune armor. The jaw on the cold math. The apostle's mouth shapes ano for outrage. A scholar seeing graffiti on his lemma. He raises hands for a new stanza. Ro throws a grenade that doesn't explode. It unfurls a lattice of thin plates that hum. Hexagrammic warding not to block warp, but to reflect it back on itself in a way that suggests a mirror hates what it shows. The apostle's verse comes back to bite his own tongue. He tastes his God's displeasure and swallows it as a virtue. Enough, he whispers, which means he has learned something too. There are costs. He sweeps his hands. The rune field collapses of his will. Politeness ends as abruptly as a guest thrown out. Heat rushes back into the room, not as warmth, but as in decorous life. Everyone stumbles forward because they were leaning against an idea, and it is gone. He uses that stumble to leave. Not physically. This thing has found a door none of them can see. The anathema's room stays, and the Necron craft remains because it is a weight. But he has withdrawn his hand. His voice persists, thinner, like smoke finding corners. "We will prepare the next table," he says. "Bring your beast. We will feed it rest until it begs for change it cannot pay for." Ro keys every gun to every ready. "Do not chase," she says. "We have removed his knife. He will fetch another. We spend this time on living." Malchus plants the Crozius head in the cracked floor and leans, breathing like a volcano that has not chosen to erupt. He looks at the creature and then at his own palms, at the blisters rising and the frost that had been there. "You felt it," he says to the monster. "It is not a question." "Yes," he says. "I hate it." "Good," Malchus says, because he cannot forgive what he will not use. They climb back up through a hive that has, in a single hour, learned a new fear, that it is possible to be asked politely to die. He rests on a broken buttress and licks his wounds with a tongue that grows a hook for the places that resist. The Scranton hum has learned to live with denial as a neighbor. He files this under tools. Ro stands in a doorway and looks at him as if she might one day write his epitaph. "First victory," she says, and the words are both evaluation and bribe. "Costly, controlled." "Enough control," Dravian says. He looks at the casualty chalkboard. It is less full than it should be. He will light candles for names anyway. The Vindicare has vanished to a tower where Math lives. The Callidus has become a girl crying in a stairwell 2 blocks away, until she becomes a janitor mopping the same stairwell an hour later, until she leaves a shadow that does not belong to her and reduces it to powder. The Culexus is not dead. It is being carried by men who cannot agree whether to feel anything. Their handler hums through clenched teeth. Ro tilts her head and listens to the way the city breathes now. It coughs, but it breathes. She keys a quiet vox band for officers who can handle quiet. "We will hold a council in the chapel, because it will be cleaned, and because it is good for the living to see the living plan near the dead," she says. "Bring bread if you have it. Bring hate if you do not. Both feed." The council is not pomp. It is pageantry only in the way of simple acts done under icons. They lay maps on a slab that once held relics, and no one says sorry because no one has time to lie to a god that large. Civilians watch, eyes wide, hands shaking. A child chewing her knuckles in a window where glass used to be. Malchus speaks first. "We must set the terms for this thing's use," he says, and uses a gloved hand to tap the blast slot where the creature's eye is absent now, because he listens from darkness. Not a leash, a litany. "Terms," Dravian agrees. He looks up at Ro. "You understand trade best." Ro's mouth curves. "Our terms are simple," she says to the air that holds teeth. "You do not kill our unarmed. You present yourself for observation between hunts. You accept combatants marked by our sigils as ours, even if they shoot near you by error. You do not eat bodies we specify as sacred." He considers 1 beat, 2. "I will not eat painted bones," he says, because he has learned the taste of paint on skin that believes and finds no calories in it. "If they shoot at me, they are meat. If they shoot at you after I tell them not to, they are meat." Ro amends. "If you kill one by error, and I cannot argue that error was honest, I will send the man with the black face to drink your nothing again." He tastes the memory of the blank's palm on his head and thinks no. But he accepts, because the violence must continue, and he is not picky about who writes the rules of a hunt, where he can do the hunting. "Agreed," he says. The word sounds like a rock lodging somewhere useful. Malchus nods grudging satisfaction. Then the question becomes soul, he says to his men whose eyes shine. You did not kneel when that sound told you to. Good. You will not kneel when the next voice says sleep either. A girl, Mira, though no one here knows, edges forward with a basket of bread gone hard and a skin of water that tastes like iron. She looks at the reclusiarch, the marshal, the inquisitor, and then at the hole past which the monster listens. I saw it cover us from the blast, she says. That counts. But my son sleeps 3 blocks from where it climbed the wall. That counts too. It all counts, Dravian says, and takes a piece of bread and breaks it again. We will be judged by the total. Ro lifts a hand without sanctimony. Mercy is a weapon, she says. We use it when the enemy wants us to forget it exists. Malchus's lip twists, but his eyes are kind. Mercy is a duty, he says. We use it even when the enemy doesn't. They argue not to win, but to hear the edges of their convictions. The room warms with that old human heat. Belief complicated by survival. He listens. He learns a new word. Mercy. It tastes like a tooth left in meat you can step around. The next alarm finds them with bread in hand. It is not a siren. It is a change in rhythm. The hive's heartbeat stutters. The Tyranid shadow on the auspex returns, larger, not because a new ship has come, but because the existing sin has unfurled a thought. At the same breath, the Vox picks up a code overlay that arrives not as sound but as correction. A machine hymn that wants to update artillery to a habit of missing a thing by a constant angle. Sabotage, the Magos hisses. Noospheric meme. Perversion on the mesh. Word bearers, Ro says, even when it is the Mechanicus being harmed, because chaos has hands in everything when it is lazy. They wore your networks like a glove for a minute. Cut. Isolate. Cutting now, the Muggle says, and the bunker feels the city's nerves being cut and resoldered. Over that, under it, next to it, the Tyranid thought sharpens a second synapse route. This time, not a brain, but a gland. The air smells sweet, a second before eyes begin to water. Civilians stagger and smile at no one. Soldiers turn guns on corners that do not threaten them. Hormonal fog. Spore bias, Dravian snaps. Masks on. If you cannot find one, find a faith. Either will limit influence. Ro's eyes flick to the hole in the wall where the monster waits. Do you smell it? He tastes it. He hates it. He moves. He does not run to the plateau this time. He drops into the underhive, not to the room of polite rest, but to a place the map refused to draw. The air here is warm, not like flesh, but like a promise. He feels the gland's mind hum through the stone, and the stone hum back, as if proud to carry it. A noise like efficient air kisses his ears. The Culexus returns, field tight, hunger narrower, handler smarter. The assassin regards him from across corridor, speculum closed, aura a coin. It does not approach. It watches. It is there to be a knife if he forgets mercy or takes too much. He files it like a wolf files a cougar in a forest. Information, not threat, unless you act wrong. He goes where the hum thickens. He finds the gland hanging like a fruit in a cavern the word-bearers had intended for rites and abandoned because another god arrived. It is wet under its skin and dry in its intention. Pipes carry its exhalation into ventilation lines that will kiss faces from here to Port Spire. Warriors ring it like books around a forbidden section. Runes scrawled by human hands stain the walls around them. A one-verse prayer to greed. Let me own the breath. He wades into the warriors, low, fast, indifferent to their praise of the synapse he severed. That is over. This is now. He makes a circle of dead around the gland, and then makes the circle a ditch for the gland to fall into when it dies. He learns the gland's skin in 2 bites, so that the third bite is already a tool. He bites to make a mouth where his teeth do not meet resistance. The gland tries to change his mind. It reaches into his blood with odors that tell lizards to mate and mothers to hold still. It finds a chemical tree where hate sits like frost on branches, and the frost will not melt. He eats the branches with the frost on purpose to see if the frost is a spice. It is not. It is a practice. He does not rupture the gland, because rupture is chaos, and the hive is already enough of that. He enters the gland and absorbs it, because polite endings are for sermons and teeth are for doctrine. He drinks the hormones into a space inside him that does not negotiate. The room's sweetness thins, the city's breath unfogs. A warrior that has managed to survive by not being in the way leaps with perfect timing and tries to split his head. The blow strikes true. He lets it, then stores the pain as a gift to himself later when he will need to remember why he killed. He pulls back from the gland. It is smaller now, but still singing, and still attached by 2 fat roots to the hive's ducts. He clamps those with a mouth that grows like a hand and holds. Rose's voice comes through stone. "Do not pop it," she says mildly, which is all the leverage she uses because she knows who he is. "Choke it." He chokes it until it chokes out a last sigh and collapses into something that wants to be meat and cannot quite remember how. He leaves it because his body is not a charity that eats things without a point. He turns and the Culexus stands there, face blank, hunger blanker. It doesn't raise its weapon. He doesn't raise his anything. They regard each other the way 2 different animals regard a third. Ro and Dravian reach the cavern's mouth with a squad who have learned to keep their weapons pointed at the floor around this thing, unless she says otherwise. Malchus's Crozius hums a steady comfort like a furnace in winter. "You didn't kill anyone to do this," Dravian says. "Not as praise, not as hope, but as a datum." "I killed enough," he says. Malchus nods once only. "And not too much," he says. "I will remember." The Culexus tilts its head, just so. Its aura prickles the gland in his belly in a way that makes him aware of a physics he cannot own. His plates almost bristle. He smooths them. He will remember the taste of that weapon's patience. "New enemy." A Voxadept crackles from behind Ro. Fleet augurs register a shift. Not Nids, not Orcs, not Chaos. Unidentified. Not ours. Ro's face tightens. "Describe the signature." The answer is slow because the machine spirit doesn't want to. "Cold," the adept says. "Zeros. We're seeing zeros." The Magos' voice beeps into anger. "Necron," he says again. This time as judgment, not as intrigue. A tomb ship. Noctilith spike forming in orbit. Surface emergence likely in one of the old mines beneath the hive. Dravian closes his eyes for a fraction and opens them because he cannot afford fractions. "We move," he says. "We hold this city, again and again." Ro looks at the monster. "We have pointed you at hunger and faith," she says. "Now we point you at mathematics." He tastes the word. It is brittle, like bone. "Point," he says. They step out into the hive where every alley smells like choices, and the sky draws a new problem in green lines through night. Power scaling interlude. I continues by necessity as men learn in motion. The Necron's oaths are not to gods but to invariants. Their weapons deny curves and force lines. Against adaptation, which is a set of curves learning to be better curves, a line is a guillotine. The Noctilith spike above will drag the warp thin and make blanks of stones. The anathema below will make change pay toll. Between, a city that wants to live. And in the middle, a thing that hates, learning that hate, must choose which zero to bite first. The hive adjusts to zeros in the sky by remembering how to breathe through smoke. Commanders call patterns without raising their voices. Priests count courage with beads that know the shape of blood. The Auspex wall draws green pillars that were not there yesterday and never wanted to be explained. Necron. Rose Council stands under St. Irenaeus' cracked icon and leans into a map drawn in vectors and denial. The Margot's voice ticks like a clock made of knives. Noctilith spike. Orbital locus 5 degrees sunward. Effect. Warp attenuation approaching field null. Secondary. Ground emergence signatures beneath iron mines Golgotha 7 and Kether 2. Expect canopic vanguard. Silent network. Standard counters will fail. Why? Dravian says. Because he teaches as he orders. Because they do not accept your physics, the Magos replies. Your melter cuts heat. Their plates will be elsewhere for that heat. Your last will scar where they were. Your psychers will be bled to prayer by the spike. Their weapons do not wound flesh. They harvest order. Each strike removes a layer of matter's permission to be itself. Malchus's usurped chapel answers with a murmur of men who have learned to live with such sentences. He rests his palm on his Crozius and listens without closing his eyes. Goal? He asks. Probe, Rose says. They tasted our anathema when we broke the word-bearer script. They will erase what can become. They will try to pin this hive into a diagram and subtract. Secondary goal. Capture our beast. The blast slit beyond the altar is black. The beast listens because listening is an ambush without movement. Rose's hand is a knife above the hololith, carving paths. We break the silent net first, she says. Kill scarabs, spiders, any canoptech relay. We deny their eyes. Malchus, you take the Templars into Golgotha 7 and smash what looks like maintenance. Lord Marshal, you hold the encirclement. Artillery by sight lines, not points. Margos, give me power spikes on their emergencies. And it. She tips her chin toward the hole. We point him at whatever their brain uses to be clever. He tastes the word brain. They move like parts of a machine that has decided to be a creature. Tanks roll with muffled tracks. Prayer vox hums around them, not loud enough to be defiance, only loud enough to keep tongues honest. Under the city, where minds become cathedrals to absence, the first whisper of canoptech movement tickles old dust, scarabs skittering as if thought were a surface to be polished, spiders opening abdomens full of logic. He goes ahead of their boots, not to save them, but to ensure they are useful. He fits the mind tunnels by refusing to notice when they do not. Rock that would confound giants yields to a geometry that declines to apologize. Scarabs swarm him with eager mandibles promising order. He opens a mouth that is not a mouth and blows the Scranton hum into their tiny engines. They stop, not dead, but undecided. He tramples indecision into paste. A canoptech spider pulls itself from a shaft like a demigod and releases a cloud of repaired things that feather the air toward his wounds. They are meant to fix Necron plates. They try to fix him instead, not with kindness, but with mandate. Be this, be flat, be smooth. He takes the tiny arms into his skin and lets them work, then grows hair-thin barbs under their grasp and keeps them there like splinters to remind him to hate. He follows the logic along the mine rails to a place where the stone has been replaced with something that remembers being a star. Noctilith grown in hexes, black that eats color, columns humming in a key that breaks choir boys. There, in a hush made of old math, something waits that is not a general but believes in generals the way a temple believes in saints. The cryptech carries history like a scalpel. Its frame is a cloister of long limbs. Glyphs run across a breastplate that has never been touched by weather. In one hand, a staff of split crystal sheathed in living silence. In the other, a device like a lantern that does not shine. The chronometron at its waist ticks without numbers. 3 death marks unfold out of the walls as if the walls have remembered them. and the canoptech spider parks behind like a god's altar, legs sunk into sockets meant for prayer. The cryptech tilts its skull. There is no soul behind the eye lenses. There is only memory. It lifts the staff and says a word in code. 0. He moves to eat the word. He is slow before he starts. The space between two steps stretches and becomes a slope. The entropic lance licks him from shoulder through chest to flank, with a beam that is not light, but a subtraction. Wound is the wrong term. The gash reeks of a shape that declines to have a past. The plates there are not broken, they are uninvented. The flesh around the line tries to remember how to be him and they cannot agree on a grammar. He lunges anyway, because some things must be taught while bleeding. The chronometron stutters the room. He slides sideways into a version of the tunnel where he has already failed to leap. Deathmarks' rounds crack into his joints on frames of a second that should not belong to them. He tears one from the wall and it becomes dust that struggles to remember being a rifle. Another fires through his eyes from behind. He grows a lid inside the socket out of spite, and the round lodges, arguing with hate. He takes the staff to the face and knows what it is to be a problem set ungraded indefinitely. Pain changes nothing, and so he uses it for language. He drops low in a way that is a question and lifts the cryptech with his forelimbs, testing leverage. The staff passes through his elbows with a tidy tick and leaves behind gaps that do not leak. They void. He headbutts the cryptech and finds no flesh to bruise. The skull rings like regret. He bites the chronometron. His teeth skate and leave a dent of refusal. The spider opens its abdomen and vomits a cloud of maintenance that coalesces into a shape around him. It renders him architectural with ambition, molds him into right angles, persuades him to be corner and corridor. His tail jerks, and the jerk becomes a line they can see, and the canoptech cloud tries to file it straight, then breaks, because spite makes poor squares. He throws himself against a noctilith pillar, and the pillar absorbs his motion and does nothing else, because this is not a thing you break. He turns, bleeding untime, and takes 3 rounds from Deathmarks into the seams behind his jaws. He eats one because swallowing a shot defeats record keeping. He faints right, and the cryptech allows it, because nothing in it remembers panic. He makes a choice that is not sane. He moves not to kill, but to touch the staff again and let it cut him in a new line. It does, from jaw hinge to hip. He memorizes the angle of subtraction. He grows a rim of horn around the edge of that wound that is not a wound to turn future zeros aside like rain. The chronometron ticks. The cryptech steps one step that is all steps and appears behind him where his spine rights itself. It taps the staff lightly like a tutor correcting. Something bright and cold blossoms in his core. The Scranton shards rattle. The hum that has been a friend to his cheating answers with a stammer. The entropic line meets the null in him, and both agree. This should hurt forever. He slams himself backward into the cryptech and crushes it against its own altar. The body holds because geometry is stubborn here. He opens his chest mouth and breathes the hum full in the cryptech's not face. The staff slices his tongue off in a minimum cut that leaves no story behind. He grows a new tongue out of the hate that sees this, and howls because he refuses to be courteous. Malchus arrives in the doorway like an oath. He steps into the room that has chosen to be sure of itself and refuses to check his stride. 2 Templars flank him. One falls immediately as a deathmark round erases his knee, not the bone but the permission to have knee. He dies roaring. The other throws sanctified melter at the spider and die-casts it in warmth the noctilith cannot altogether deny. The thing goes limper, and parts of it remember being ore. Name yourself, the reclusiarch shouts, because he has learned that names in here stick knives where they should. I am, the cryptech says without saying. because things like it never need to name. Existence is claim enough. Ro angles into view on one knee, carbine up, firing not at faces, but at the chronometron when the cryptek steps, because she counts how the room ignores angles and chooses different ones. She puts a round into the device housing. It chips, daring her to believe that matters. She puts a second round into the same chip, on the next version of this moment the chronometron permits. It cracks in a polygon that despises her. She lowers the carbine and tells herself not to smile. The cryptek raises its staff again for the long, correcting cut. He reaches across the space between and touches its hand. The hand is more principle than metal, but he is an animal skilled in touching to make the world speak. He loops a tendon around the cryptek's wrist with a motion he learned biting horses to their knees. The chronomancer has never been a horse. It learns. He yanks. The staff kisses the noctilith with intent, a sound like equations unwriting. The pillar inhales a zero larger than usual and shudders in a way no geometry likes. Mechanicus vents scream on Rose Vox. Field fluctuation, the Magos hisses. Now, now. He drags the cryptek as if it were prey, and he a child again in a desert of his making. The chronometron stutters and falls a half-breath behind itself. The staff flickers. He reverses grip, takes the cryptek's other arm in his mouth, and chews until the staff falls. He kicks it away. It slides to Malchus's boot. The Reclusiarch plants his Crozius on it like a symbol and holds. The death marks mark and fire, believing ritual will secure results. 2 hit, 1 does not, because Dravian's artillery, synchronized by a noospheric whisper that has learned to talk in ruins, collapses a ceiling at a distance. Dust writes a second alphabet into the air, and that alphabet denies their bullets a sentence. He bites down on the cryptek's torso and feels no blood, only contempt. The thing folds not to flee but to adjust. The head splits into 2 planes. A tesseract labyrinth blossoms in its hand like a flower that can count. It opens in a way that suggests an answer printed before a question. He is fast. The labyrinth is faster because his speed is flesh, and the labyrinth is idea. It drinks half of him into a cube that decides to be small in a precise tone. He grips the edge with claws he refuses to let a machine understand. He holds on because letting go is consent. The box sings cousin to the Scranton hum, and the note cracks one of his bones with music. Inside the labyrinth, he sees a shard of a god the Necrons once thought they had. Light takes human shapes to be kind and fails at kindness. A face like a golden lie looks at him and tilts to match his scale. It speaks in images because speech would break this room. It offers him an infinity with rules he could learn to enjoy. Break before you're broken. Unmake without becoming. Be hunger perfected without pain. It shows him a galaxy the shape of a jaw with every star a tooth and promises him a roller's tongue. He watches. He hates. He considers the convenience of a meal without cost. Feels the Scranton shards in him cry yes to a steady frequency of denial. He feels the entropic line in his body smile because a universe that refuses to become is a place where pain is predictable. He bites the image's wrist. The light has no nerves. It flinches anyway because the flinch is a story, and he knows stories. No, he says. I am impolite. Outside the cube, the cryptek locks its palm, and the labyrinth hums in satisfaction as it learns a weight it enjoys. Malchus roars a part prayer, part curse, and brings his Crozius down on the box with a blow that should make no difference and does, because his arm has been in the habit of surviving disappointment for 80 years. The labyrinth cracks across a seam that is not one. Light leaks like a hypothesis dying. He pulls the rest of himself out through a cut that should not have space for a finger, and makes a hole admit a liar. The cryptech reaches for the box with the hunger of a collector. He slaps the hand away with a tail like a whip exactly once. The staff is under Malchus's boot, and the priest will not move his foot. The cryptech scythes a spare hand, and the entropic line through his chest jerks, as if remembering it is supposed to black out existence. He grinds plates into that line as if scar tissue can teach Noctilith to accept a scar. The wound whispers that he owes infinity taxes forever. He does not pay. He walks over the debt. Rose's breath comes fast and small. She slides into a better angle and sends a signal on a private band. Now, she says. Dravian's men don't fire, they pull. Chains sing down from pit cranes left by men who are dust. Hooked, the Noctilith pillar leans as if listening is an option. 4 Templars planted charges on supports, while Malchus kissed the staff with his boot. Those charges do not explode. They choose to no longer be where they were. Bolt sighs. There is a mood in the mind like prayer going wrong. He shoulders the cryptech into the falling angle and hears something like annoyance cross a machine spirit 100 meters tall. The pillar tilts far enough to break the habit of permanence. A field collapses somewhere higher up in a slow, permanent way, as if a lens has been cracked but will take centuries to stop admitting light. The death marks retreat into walls that are becoming finally their only refuge. The spider spasms and drops a sack of repair things that scuttle in a circle and then decide nothing. The cryptech relaxes and steps in 2 directions at once. He chooses a third and bites where both steps would meet. He returns to him with a shard of the chronometron in his mouth. He swallows it, not for use, but to deny. The world shakes with more meaning than gravity. Silence has a hole. The Noctilith spike hum drops a shade. Psychers, far above who were one breath from death, find their heads not ringing long enough to cry. He almost lifts the cryptech to break the skull for satisfaction, then doesn't, because satisfaction is a tax. He drops it on the tracks. He steps on the skull until it jumps from shape to shape and then fails to be any of the shapes it wants. He leaves it alive enough to tell the tomb ship, there is a problem here. Codex note. Entropic lance wounds coordinate with Noctilith fields to erase regenerative information rather than tissue. Scar formation requires imposing a new past by force. He staggers. The entropic lines across him refuse to be owned. He's lighter, not by mass but by meaning. The Scranton shards in him buzz like flies in a jar shaken by a child. He is tempted to shut them off, and then knows any off would be forever. Malchus stands with both hands on the Crozius and lets his sweat taste like iron in a holy mouth. Roe leans a shoulder into a pillar that once was a map and is now a question. Dravian's men hold a perimeter with guns facing every direction, because here, in this logic, there is no rear. Dravian's voice comes on a core channel, tin in truth. City intact, spike weakened. Casualties, he does not say them. Next move. Before the next, a new voice says, and it is not in the Vox. It is through the bones of the mine and the brass of the chapel above, and the pressure in the lungs of the hive. It is a speaking that used to be a man and now is only duty. A choir of astropaths scream until someone is kind and cuts their throats. Rose's eyes narrow to slits. That is not a local, she says. That is writ. Malchus's head tips as if he can feel wind in a ship with no sails. Black Seal, he says, and fear and joy share a heartbeat. The voice does not travel space. It travels obedience. By the Sanatorum Imperialis and the Lords of Terror. It speaks inside every skull that can bear it. Asset Theta Exterminans, identified under Armageddon. War theatre is to be conveyed under silent custody for judgment and sanction. This is not request. This is law. The Culexus, waiting in a cross corridor, unseen by most eyes, inclines its featureless head, as if it has listened to a priest who does not bore it. The speculum's shutters whisper open a fraction and taste the announcement. Ro looks up through rock and knows who sent the edict, because she recognizes the shape of a signature, even when signatures travel without ink. She looks at the beast and tilts her chin once. "There is our mandate," she says. "We do this, or we will spend the next 10 years hiding, and we are not built to hide." The offer returns while blood cools, the light in the labyrinth, the line that could be a law like him. It comes in new clothes, not Necron now, but a word-bearer whisper, promising he can be a knife for a god that will never lie about eating everything. It would place him on an altar made of stops. It would praise him for hating correctly. He thinks of the line that will not heal. He thinks of a woman whose bread was hard and whose son's sleep smelled like saints. He thinks of the assassin whose hunger is not malice but profession. He finds himself heavy with a new kind of arithmetic. Costs he is inviting. "No," he says again to the air. It is less loud now. It is more expensive. He leaves the mine not with triumph, but with a balance in his bones. The noctilith pillar is tilted forever. The cryptech will recalibrate. The word-bearers will find a new politeness to demand. The Tyranids will adjust the angle of their fall. He has learned that refusal buys knives. Above ground, the Hive has placed candles in safe corners and names beside them. Dravion cannot bring himself to read them yet. Malchus lays a burned hand on a child's head and says nothing. Ro removes her gloves and rubs her fingers together as if sensation might teach her a better plan. "You bled," she says to the black in the blast slot, "and you refused a leash when it would have stopped pain." "I will always refuse," he says. "Good," she says with a thin, bad laugh, "because good here is doing harm to the right thing and surviving the rest. We leave. Black ship, silent escort. You will see a throne no one sits in and be judged by a man who does not stand up." Malchus's eyes glow with a loyalty that has not dimmed in the dark. "We can hold this city without you," he says, and makes it a challenge, not a dismissal. Dravion scratches a line on his board with a thumb, and then rubs it away because he refuses to memorialize anything that is ongoing. "We can," he agrees. "We choose to burn somewhere else for a while." The sacred sign comes as a mechanical noise any child would recognize. A bell. It rings from the chapel where there is no bell, because the bell was sold for ammunition 3 wars ago. The tone is not miracle, it is memory. Someone has found a piece of iron and a bolt and made them speak. Men stand a fraction straighter. Women turn their faces away to hide tears, because tears are salt the city cannot spare. That, Rose says softly, is stakes. He listens. The bell's tone enters the place where the Scranton shards hurt and coats their edges like oil. The hum does not soften. It finds a rhythm. He learns a thing he did not expect. He can hate and still choose a beat that is not his own. He follows the escort because that is the agreement. He lets Malchus's men flank him, not to guard him, but to guard the notion of pointed. The Callidus watches from 3 faces away. The Vindicare writes numbers on a new perch. The Culexus keeps its radius tight and tastes him like an instrument tuning to an unkind song. By the time they reach the lift spire, the Noctilith spike's hum has thinned to a rumour, and the Tyranid shadow has pulled its hands away to lick broken knuckles. Word-bearers hide. Their anathema rooms will sprout again like weeds in clean seams. The Necron tomb ship adjusts its lens and moves the way a book closes when you agree to return to it. Rose stops at the base of the spire and turns. "We go now," she says, and her voice assumes all of them will obey, because to imagine anything else wastes time. The black ship is already in low orbit. Sisters of Silence will keep you from enjoying the trip too much. Templars will ensure we all remember we have souls. If you run, we will choose which city to sacrifice catching you. He tastes the threat because all threats are calories if you work at them. He does not run. He wants to see the place where the law lives. He wants to bite its ankle and see. Something old reaches for him through the grating of prayer and metal. It is not the deceiver's shard with its sparkling lies. It is not the apostle's polite rest. It is a thing below names, a tide of minds that has tasted the hole he left in the choir and wants to see if it can make its hunger wear him. The hive mind offers him a role. Be a mouth that refuses to close. Swim with teeth. Hate with purpose. He almost laughs because the flavor is honest. Starvation as mathematics. He denies it not because it would use him, but because it wants consensus. I will not be part of you, he says. I do not consent. The lift rises. The hive shrinks to a map under them, and maps have always made him angry because they pretend to know the world. The bell stops. The people below become points. He learns to hate the distance too. On the platform where shuttles kiss and leave, a black ship waits like a coffin for gods. Its hull is black enough to shame funerals. Sigils crawl its sides in ciphers that avoid being seen by eyes they do not love. Sisters of silence stand with faces like knives facing inward. Their presence makes the air dull. The Culexus's field meets theirs and complicates the idea of breath. Malchus wavers, not in faith, but in biology. We are not meant to be here long, he says, and allows himself the luxury of telling truth as complaint. Ro breathes shallow to reduce the sense that she is smaller than her armor. He steps onto the deck and feels his edges go afraid. The Scranton shards do not sing. They lie still as insects in frost. The entropic lines across him wear grins. He refuses them reality and presses forward. Each step a choice. Point, he says. Terror, Ro says. They rise on a vector that is mostly prayer. The ship does not jump. It refuses to trust the warp in the shadow of the spike, so it claws the space between with patience. He learns the pain of not changing under supervision. He considers eating a sister. He does not, because rules are bargains and bargains are clever. At 8 the bell of the ship that does not keep bells, the sacred intervention arrives with no sound. A relic moves where no relic is supposed to move. A sliver of luminous bone, carried by a silent woman with eyes like clean water, processes past. Every mind aboard feels its memory tidy for a heartbeat, as if a hand has smoothed the page. No shortcuts, only stakes. He feels the urge to kneel like a muscle cramp and does not yield. He sleeps in a way that has nothing to do with closing eyes. He wakes to an alarm in a frequency that teaches metal to be nervous. Ro's voice is tired and bright. Interdiction, she says into the dead air that cannot carry much. Mid-transit intercept. Not warp, real space. Prepare to repel borders. He wonders, briefly, whether law travels faster if you try to stop it. He grins because he wants to be judged and then released to break with sanction. The first sign is not sound, it is subtraction. Half a corridor is not there for a blink, and when it returns, it is rearranged with holes for men where men were. Necron boarding in slices. The ship groans as its geometry has second thoughts. Sisters go to their knees and then stand because they do not have a word for kneeling. He moves. He breaks bulkheads with honesty. He meets an Lichguard's blade with his jaw and loses half the jaw and grows a second head around the blade and refuses to admit confusion. The cryptek did not die. Its body led others here in a language of vectors. It carries a new staff that pretends not to be entropic and is worse because it is patient. Ro fires at elbows again because she trusts some habits to be eternal. Malchus whispers a poem that makes his men stop walking into a line of Gauss fire that has been sent to teach mortality. The Culexus takes a step into a room that refuses to react and finds that even Necrons need something like a soul to compute. The speculum opens to taste that absence and then shuts, because famine is not a meal. He meets the cryptech in a corridor full of air that has decided it does not have to celebrate lungs. They clash like bad brothers. The staff touches him and says a gentle cut this time, and it is worse than the clean subtraction. The wound keeps reminding his body not to own itself. Ro empties a magazine into the chronometron's new housing, and the device sniffs and shrugs. He hears the deceiver's shard again, not in the labyrinth now, but in the way the cryptech does not fear. It promises he could be their knife if he will accept rules. It promises he could erase worlds and save himself the trouble of learning names. He refuses and pays. He chooses to take a staff head to his ribs to cover the reclusiarch. The crack says, 3 plates gone. He does not regret, not because he is good, but because debt is a form of hate. Malchus's Crozius comes down on the staff and makes a sound like a prayer breaking and becoming stronger. The staff's crystal flickers. The chronometron coughs. Ro's next shot drives a wedge into the chisel of time. The staff judders. He takes the cryptech in his mouth and uses the wall to teach it about corners. Alarms at a higher frequency declare that judgment has arrived early. Terra's fleet has sent a spear sideways into the system to say, "You are ours when we reach you." The Necron board is thin, not because they are afraid, but because plans have changed. The cryptech disengages by being elsewhere. He bites empty air and enjoys the taste of annoyance. He lurches. Blood he does not admit exists slides down his flanks and steams in silence. The sisters form a wedge around Ro and move as if grace were a drill. Malchus plants his Crozius under the weight of an idea. He waits. He has learned patience, which worries him because it feels like manners. The Noctilith spike reappears in the aft auspex like a black nail. It is followed with a mind of its own, disagreeing with the ship's choice to travel under discipline. Ro mutters a benediction to augurs and orders a burn that will kiss the atmosphere with suffering when they arrive. She looks at the beast and smiles with too many teeth for diplomacy. "Still with us?" she asks. "I will be when you die," he says, which is his closest thing to affection. She nods, accepting that as fair. The black ship arrives in the Sol system to a geometry of duty. Golden platforms unfold around it with the courtesy of a universe well organized. The palace grows out of the world like a mountain designed by a cathedral. It shines not with light, but with reputation. He feels the Scranton shards go quiet, as if someone wiser has laid a hand on their jar. He has been hurt in new ways. Entropic lines in him argue for a ceasefire. He refuses because war is his grammar. He knows he will be asked to explain himself to a silence older than hate. The bell rings again, this time a real one. He goes forward to meet a throne and the thing upon it that is and is not a man. He does not expect forgiveness. He expects a choice. He will make it with his teeth. The black ship becomes a monastery with engines. Every footstep learns to whisper. Choir stalls of empty air flank corridors that remember storms. Hololith saints taper to lines in the sister's presence and refuse to glow. The beast lies where the deck accepts his weight and pretends to sleep because watching is easier when you do not move. Vindicare writes, "Smell of oil and hot metal." A secutor priest surveys the entropic lines across his plates and annotates them in binaric with a tenderness that would be love if it had patience for motherhood. He offers tools, clamps, cautery, neat denial. "Scar that refuses to persist," he says to Ro with a rasp that sounds like someone sanding themselves. "We will not fix it. We will teach it manners." "Teach me," the reclusiarch says, because his palm still burns when he looks at the wound. The Magos assigns him a litany whose words are angles. Malchus repeats them until they lodge in his hand like a nail. They make a chapel in an empty hold and call it a chapel, because men stand there and mean it. A sheet of armor plate becomes an altar. The iron stain of engine coolant becomes a sacrament. Malchus preaches standing beside a sister who cannot speak, and whose never speech is a chorus. He does not preach safety, he preaches cost. Rose stands at the edge and argues out loud with herself and with him because arguments ventilate hope. Doctrine would kill it, she says, chin up. Dogma would starve a city because feeding it does not look like purity. Grant the purity of a clean death to citizen and sinner equally, Malchus replies. Doctrine is the story that let us reach this ship. We could have eaten ourselves long ago with cleverness. You will die making that point, she says, and there is no scorn. I will die anyway, he answers. I prefer phrases that fit on my tomb. He listens. The words are meat he cannot use, yet he stores them the way he stores knives he does not need now. Through the hull comes the quiet of space that is not quiet, a pressure on the ears of the soul. In the sister's shadow, his Scranton hum lies like a dog at a fire, awake, warm, not quite obedient. On the fourth watch, a day that does not exist here, the ship's logic splits a corridor and swallows a squad of armsmen without leaving blood. The Claxons speak once, then die because this is not an alarm. It is a discovery. Roe walks like a woman with a verdict already written, and Malchus falls in beside her with his Crozius already humming. The sound of a furnace not quite needed yet. The intercept wears the shape of trust. The deck irises open without permission. A cage rises like a memory pushed from below. Inside, a creature unfolds composed of nothing that should agree with itself. Plates like noonstone grown in a cathedral. Ribs that are carefully incorrect. A mane of filament that drinks sound. It breathes without moving air. Where it stands, the lights decide to cool. The sisters step forward, as if it were a prayer. Their bald heads turn as one to make a radius of lac around the cage. Their leader raises a hand and the latch sighs, as if a lock has waited to be opened all its life. Rose's jaw tightens. Who authorized this? She asks, and her voice finds a man on a cross-ship cradle with a rosette he should not have. The color wrong in a way her senses file for later. Joint custodial directive, the man says without apology, which means he is lying all right. Null menagerie asset 7, pallid Rex, designed to study, optimize, and, if required, end theta exterminans. Malchus breathes once, hard. You bred a copy, he says. An answer, the man says, calm as a mathematical proof. Adaptation without hate. Survival without choice. A tool without disobedience. It steps from the cage. The deck flinches. Where it places a foot, bolts hum and settle into a truer hex. It regards him like a mirror that has decided not to reflect. The Scranton shards inside him shriek. Then they hush, abashed, like dogs in a pope's hall. He steps forward because something old in him insists on killing the lie at once. The sisters do not move to stop either creature. Their faces are masks of blank compassion. Their aura makes the corridor narrow to a proposition. Stay, says the man with the wrong rosette. And the word bites both beasts. The pallid Rex accepts the command without a ripple. He does not. His plates bristle. Then they smooth, because anger is a shape this place dislikes. They touch. Where they meet, adaptation tries to become a handshake. His flesh offers variables and expects a conversation. The Rex's skin offers a function that assumes constant terms. Equations argue in the seam between them until suddenly the math is not theoretical. His growth stops in the line of jaw where it would have turned to knives. The knives become angles, the angles become flat. He bites through flatness anyway, because hate is a chisel. The Pallid Rex is fast, but not like him. It is correct. It moves along minima. It selects cuts that have been proven once in a diagram. Its mouth closes around his shoulder in a bite that is not strong, but is placed where intention lives. He feels himself go polite there. He tears the shoulder away and regrows it wrong on purpose. Malchus tries to move and cannot for a second. The word stay touches his bones and he almost says amen. Ro leans into that second, hard enough to topple it. Stand, she says low, and the sisters' eyes flash because they cannot speak, but they approve of rebellion properly aimed. The Pallid Rex broadcasts silence. It is not a field like the Culexus. It is an etiquette. He cannot grow spines where the floor would find them rude. He laughs without breath because he has found the flaw. The Rex assumes courtesy. He backs it toward a bulkhead he has already broken and memorized. He will choose a kind of impoliteness the flaw cannot forbid. The ship answers with a trumpet no instrument could make. Every light on every deck bows. The air becomes gold. The Astronomicon does not shine through hulls. It shines through intention. For a heartbeat, the beacon that is not a star insists, graciously and without argument, that movement in a certain direction is the only decent thing. The sister's eyes wet and dry without becoming tears. Malchus's Crozius flickers, as if it remembers a hammer that once struck the first anvil. Ro's mouth opens around a smile she does not let finish. The Pallid Rex pauses with a leg halfway to a place the deck prefers. It learns the lesson of lines that do not belong to it. It steps back into its cage. The latch listens and accepts. He looks at the gold in the air and hates it, because it changes him without his consent. Then, reluctantly, he does what it is asking. He pulls away and sits hard enough to dent a plate and emphasize his choice. Reach the throne, says a voice that is not a voice and belongs to nothing made of lungs. Ro closes her eyes for one blink. When she opens them, she is smiling the way a soldier smiles at a bridge that did not fall. We will, she says, to law and accident alike. Log your pet, she tells the man with the wrong rosette, each word a stone. It can watch. He does not argue because he is not a fool, only administratively brave. The rest of the passage is a pilgrimage written by machines. The black ship descends toward a world that looks less like a planet and more like an oath. Orbital fortresses bracket lanes with cautionary guns. Defense monitors escort like wolves that have taken vows. Thunderhawks run as beads on straight rosaries between void and stone. Through a window that is not a window, he sees continents arranged by a hand that was careful with beauty, and then had to be careful with barricades. Terror. They enter at a height where storms are policy. The palace grows until it is not a building but a landscape. Every wall a mountain with scrollwork. Every gate a 6-lane myth. Cathedra cluster like barnacles on the sides of things too large to be understood. Statues watch, patient and tired, have been watching since they were old and never learned another trade. At the landing concourse, gold stands in formation. Custodians in auramite stand like opinions too heavy to move. Each bears a spear that remembers particular throats by name. Between them, bands of Sisters of Silence, their pallid calm the negative of the custodian's extravagant presence. Tech adepts hover like crows near a field hospital. Their limbs have been optimized for triage, blasphemy, and love. Servo automata carry stretchers that carry laws written in wounded men. Ro walks down the ramp carrying no banners. Malchus follows with his Crozius grounded and head bared because there are roofs here that make even reclusiarchs take their hats off. The beast pads under a canopy of guns that do not quite aim at him and will obey if told to. A woman meets them in armor the color of late wheat before a burn. Her face is centuries of decision. Her eyes are the bad weather over oceans the size of continents. She is not the throne. She is the knife that keeps men from cutting it with their selfishness. She gestures once, not small and not big. This way, she says. And even custodians step a fraction when she speaks. They pass through hypostyle halls where columns the thickness of district towers hold up the ceiling's opinion. They cross causeways with guardrails made of titles. They climb stairs worn by pilgrims whose bones are in the steps now. They enter a vestibule so silent the sound hurts. Here, the sisters never speak and insist everyone else join them. He feels himself compress. It is not pressure, it is agreement. The Scranton shards flatten. The entropic lines pipe down as if someone older has looked at them. He grows no spikes because spikes would be lies here. He feels the memory of the Astronomicon in his plates like a fever's cool. They come to a threshold with no door and a room that refuses to call itself a room. A throne sits beyond that makes the word throne embarrassed. Cables like the roots of a god tree enter a man who is not a man any longer in the way trees do not call themselves wood. Gold tries not to be obscene and fails. Light attempts to be kind and fails. Duty does not try to be anything and does not fail. None of them speak because one does not perform when the ocean is looking. He steps until Sister's hands nearly brush him and then stops because his bones will not take another step without lying. His head lifts to find a face that is lost under machinery and finds it anyway because hate knows its own sovereign when it sees a kindred refusal. Nothing happens, then everything does. There is no voice and no picture. Their brains manufacture both out of self-defense. He knows this because he can taste the lie and still needs it. He stands in a field of dry grass that never dries. A sun that burns law hangs low. Across from him, a man stands with a spear as if it were a walking stick, and eyes that know more about loving than he does about hating. The galaxy is a mouth, the man says, because the beast will hear words. You hate it for chewing, so do I. But we have different plans. He tries to speak and finds there is no air. He becomes smart enough to realize air is not the problem. He wants to say obey. He says instead, survive. The man nods. You are honest in your one way. That is useful. The ones who lie kindly and break late kill more worlds in the long sum. Images he does not own pour into him. Women digging through rubble to find a hand that still belongs to them. Boys moving ammunition who will die before they learn wine. Allies he could have eaten, standing in other rooms, arguing on behalf of souls he has licked for facts. He feels something that is not mercy. It is mathematics under mercy, the count of hours, names, loaves. You will not be pure, the man says. I have no purity to give. I have only direction and a price. He bares his teeth. Prices are food. Then chew, the man says mildly, and listen. He sees 3 paths, but he is not asked to choose. His seeing is to teach him the shape of his refusal later. He sees himself a tourist of worlds with memory theft for a fare. Another him as a bandit with a writ. Another with a collar that is a crown that weighs in new ways. He snarls and the rooms rearrange around the sound into a sentence that hurts less. Malchus falls to one knee because the silence presses his veins in a pattern that feels like faith. He chooses to kneel, which makes it not bowing. Ro does not kneel and is not punished. The custodian beside them stands with the quiet of a mountain that knows knives glance off. The message steps into them because traveling any other way would be inefficient. It is not words. It is a set of rules he can test by trying to break them. A geish in the bones of him hums like a strummed wire. A brand he cannot touch burns under scars he cannot count. He bares his teeth, and the sister's aura tightens to meet it, and none of this is a threat. It is a frisking before a dance. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Under the Throne's sanction. His adaptation learns boundaries. It accelerates against Xenos warp math and demonic vectors, but hits resistance near sanction nulls and hexagrammic seals. The Scranton hum becomes a keyed engine. It can be focused along lines marked by Imperial sigils, but it bleeds mass if used against protected innocence. The Gaius turns his own change into pain. In the presence of sisters and their black aura, he can still function, but his transitions cost twice and stick slower. When he hunts at the Throne's direction, his wounds knit along patterns the sigils permit. When he bites outside orders, the entropic lines yaw open and refuse stitches. He can choose disobedience, but the price is no longer theoretical. The room releases them with the casual grace of a god tired of speaking. The man, who is not a man, does not nod. He does not need to. The gold does not glitter more. It turns paler, as if evening has agreed to come. They back away, because turning one's back on a mountain is foolish, when the mountain is also a spear. The sister's presence expands a hair, enough to allow breath to feel earned. Malchus wipes sweat. He will not cool tears. Ro flexes fingers she had not realized were clenched and counts her knuckles to be sure. An adept in white waits like a sheet of paper with a dagger under it. Sanction exists, he says. Voice so precise syllables try to square. Asset Theta Exterminans. Operational under mandate NQ 777. Theatre selection by Ordo under custodian oversight. Boundaries clause attached. Recite, Malchus says, because words are safer spoken. No purposive harm to the unarmed under Imperial protection. Counter hostility rule. Return only proportionate to immediate survival need when sigils present. Observation intervals between hunts. No less than 8 hours under silent watch. Acceptance of null anchor proximity during deployments. Penalty schedule. Adaptive drag. Geese burn. Custodian interdiction up to and including terminal application if breach persists. Ro nods once, and her eye at the corner is tired but alive. We accept, she says, speaking for a city that will never come here. He accepts, she adds, looking at teeth that have learned to smile at laws. He huffs. It is not acceptance, it is acknowledgement. He licks the place where the brand he cannot feel sits. It tastes like iron and the time between drums. Malchus lifts his Crozius and does not kiss it. He presses his brow to the cold metal and lets himself be unflinching. We leave, he says, because pilgrimages end and wars begin again. On the way out, a custodian steps near enough to be polite. He regards the beast with an interest that is not curiosity. I will walk with you, he says, not asking. He smells like oil and oaths and the soft leather of books none of them will read. Ro glances up, amused. Do you always escort knives you have not sheathed? We escort judgments, he says. He is one. Outside, Terra's air tastes like dust that has met incense and won. The palace looms behind them like a story still being written in a patient hand. He pauses and looks back long enough to memorize an outline he will hate accurately later. He turns before the sisters must ask. On the embarkation concourse, the pallid Rex watches from behind a cage that is many cages combined into the idea of cage. It does not move. It will be moved only by the word. He looks at it and sees his flaw as a virtue in another's mouth. He bares his teeth. The sister's leader with the ocean eyes meets his glance and holds it until he looks away. Not because he cannot win, but because he is not allowed to pick that fight and keep his bargains. He files her scent as a line he will not cross. When the ship lifts, the bell in the chapel that is not his world rings again, softer, a smith tapping a blade to test its temper. He is metal. He will be struck. He will ring. He will not break if the strike is honest. He lies on the deck and pretends to sleep again. He is not afraid. He is a little insulted. The rules have teeth. He respects teeth. He is learning to respect leashes made of sentence and sign. He hates that. He accepts it because the next hunt will taste better for the hunger. In the dark between here and the war there waits where he left it. Ro and Malchus argue again, because arguments are threads that keep them tied to a world that has too many knives in it. Dogma is expensive, she says. So are bargains, he says. He opens one eye and watches the stars refuse to blink, because the sisters do not allow such liberties near them. He allows himself a thought that tastes like humility and spits it out. He thinks of the word bearer with his polite ward. He thinks of the cryptek failing to square him. He thinks of a marshal in a city of smoke, choosing which grief to feel first. He licks the geish under his skin again. It burns like clean whiskey poured on an open wound. Point, he murmurs. Soon, Ro answers, not knowing she does. The ship falls back toward war, with rules burned under his skin. He tests the geas by wanting, and it answers with pain that is clean, a hammer on hot metal reminding the metal of shape. He hates it. He accepts it because accepting is a way to bite something later. They pass into atmosphere above a world that smells of ash and metal faith. Recap. He has bled for a city, bitten math until it cracked, refused polite rest, and offered his neck to judge, but has pressure on the choices he keeps loaded. First, a path yawns sideways, thin and shining, a seam to an elsewhere shaped like the cage he broke in another cosmos. If he steps, his edges will be filed smooth by transit until memory forgets why it learned teeth. He will be free and smaller, and with every kill the past will pay itself away. Second, a path steps forward into starless open ground, a bandit with a writ only he respects. He will hunt as he pleases. Empires will aim at him, not because they dare, but because they must. He will be legend and plague. The law will become his name, and every city he saves will take a piece of itself back in fear. Third, a path braids into a chain connected to a hand that does not close. He will be pointed. The brand will burn when he forgets. The pain will teach restraint. His teeth will carry script along their roots. He will kill more of what should die, and he will bleed to keep breathing meat from falling into algebra. Ro stands beside him with silence where rope should be. I will argue for leash, she says. Our sons and their sons will live longer if someone strong chooses to be limited. Malchus steps up to the vision's edge like a man at a cliff he has jumped before. I will argue for oath, he says. Not to me, to them, to the ones who light a candle when there is no oil. He looks down. Far below, a hive draws breath in stutters. He tastes one face in a million, a crane tender with iron water and a sleeping child who may learn to laugh if someone has the discipline to be aimed. He hates the taste of discipline like old coins in a mouth, but it buys a meal. I choose, he says, finding the words by refusing easier ones. Point. The geas flexes like a muscle suddenly awake. A sigil burns along his plates and does not injure so much as insist. Lines in brass etch themselves across bone that pretends to be iron. Tiny aquila scored and hammered in. A lattice of hexagrammic marks that glow a thin workman's gold when he kills what he's told. Pain gathers itself to stay honest. He sighs, which on him is a tremor, and the tremor runs through the deck and calms when it meets Sister Silence. The shuttle kisses a battered pad. Wind claws ash from the lip of the world and throws it away, only to find there is always more. Helsreach greets them with fires arranged for practical warmth, not beauty. Dravian's bastion is repaired with trusses that know they are temporary. The bell rings once and tells everyone to make good choices. No one laughs. They have combined, the Mago says on Vox. Tyranid synapse retuned to harmonize with anathema bands. Noctilith column recited in the old waterworks. They mean to freeze adaptation at the instant of contact and erase what refuses. Ro looks at him. Go where it hurts, she says. Then go where it thinks. They step into a city whose lines are wrong because someone else is drawing. The word bearer has hung new runes under bridges and along railings. Delicate iron filigree of obedience that asks the wind to be polite and the blood to slow. The cryptex machines hum at junctions where things change direction and decide to stop. Above, the Tyranid bioship's route descends again, but now it breathes sugar that tells muscles they are tired, and that rest is holy. He moves and the Gaius bites. A woman runs in panic with a child in each arm and a loaf in her teeth. She stumbles into his path. He could go through. He cannot. The pain that is law climbs in him like a ladder someone is kicking. He banks, hits a pillar with his shoulder, and takes the load in bone so she can fall behind his shadow and not under it. The brand's heat cools by a degree. The woman screams his name, which is not a name, and he calls it knife. The first engagement is not a fight. It is a correction. He tries to grow a thicket of spines to keep swarm creatures from climbing his back, and the polite rest says no. The Noctilith hum answers by making his mistake permanent. He growls and the Scranton hum in him responds to the sigils glowing along his ribs and vectors upward along the lines of authority. Instead of curling into thorns, his plates flatten into shields scored with aquila that turn the gaunts aside like a doctrine embodied. He hates how well it works. Malchus tears into a runic yard with his Crozius set low, destroying script anchors by smell, salt and old paper, while Templars follow in a wide crescent, deliberately irregular to break a pattern the Apostle wants. The Dark Apostle himself steps into a plaza, with his hands raised, voice weighted, making the anathema room big enough to wear like a coat. He smiles at the monster across the square as if at a clever student. Rest, he offers. Stop becoming. It is kind. He is made to refuse, Malchus says, almost laughing because clarity can be a joy even in blood. Let him show you rude. He charges. The room congeals into a command to behave. He refuses with the new rules. He does not attempt to change. He moves heavy. His tail goes for the Apostle's ankles with the plain trick of a crocodile in a river that couldn't care about sermons. The floor's politeness insists. The Gaius burns. He stamps into it. Ro angles fire into runes behind the Apostle, not to kill, but to unseat. Dravian's batteries cut air into segments that deny a stance. The pallid Rex watches from a cage on a flatbed, its handler sweating hard through a wrong rosette, while sisters stand in triangle around it. The Rex's eyes track him without malice, only a pitiless interest in how he moves when law is on him. The Apostle makes a new gesture. The polite rest thickens until even the smoke slows. He feels himself stall, not for lack of strength, but for lack of permission. The brand hisses. The Scranton engine spins along the sigils like a serrated belt. He leans on the Gaius with hate until hate is leverage. He does not break the room. He punctures it. He drives a forelimb through the air next to the Apostle as if the air were canvas. The canvas is ward and text and compliance. His claw stabs through, and the world shivers in annoyance. He grabs the sleeve of the man who wants to make him nice and pulls him a half step out of his own certainty. Malchus is there with a hymn paced to match the cut. The Crozius falls. The word rest swallows a vowel because prayer is now a hammer. Sparks of sign crackle and fly. The room forgets it is a room for a second and becomes a plaza again. In a plaza, Knives happen. The Apostle stumbles. His hood falls back. His face is the tired face of a teacher who has chosen a hateful school. He lifts a hand to shape the rune that will make that stutter permanent. The Vindicare's round slaps his palm with the intimacy of mathematics. Fingers go. He howls, not because of pain, but because a note has gone from his instrument. Now, Ro says into 3 channels. He leaps. He does not eat the Apostle. He eats the anathema's corner sigils like scabs, because the Gaius tells him whose blood he is allowed to spill now and whose ideas he must starve first. They taste of iron and stubbornness. The room collapses inward like a skin without bones. The Apostle falls to one knee because suddenly being only one man in only one place takes talent, and he has spent his on a god that did not lend. Later, Malchus tells him, with a gentleness like a promise, you will learn to rest where it matters, in your grave. A green line cuts the world. He turns into it, and the entropic wound smiles at its echo. The cryptek walks out of wrong shadow with a staff that has learned to be sober, a chronometron that no longer ticks because competitions are human. This device marks denial in a steady grin. Behind it, a canoptek construct advances carrying a plate of black stone. On the plate, a Necron sigil burns. It is a pariah nexus, a field where souls go to find out what they're not. The Culexus steps from another street, and the twin holes in the world taste each other. The sisters' triangles shift with practice that leaves beauty behind. They shape an absence corridor and aim it like artillery. Ro calculates angles where hate might serve, and hatred that is coached by law might reach. Point, he says, and means give permission. Plate carrier, she says, break the nexus. We will count you out of the pain. He charges, and the pariah field hits him with a grace that is almost relief. The Scranton engine stops sounding like him for a second and becomes something else, a municipal hum drawn from an older machine. The Gaish heats. He learns how to run when skin is made of orders. The cryptek staff draws a line through his shoulder. It refuses to let the scar dry. He accepts the line and moves off it, because a man told him once to step where the blade isn't. He learns the lance's depth, then leans, then lets it go too deep and clamps with bone grown as clamps around the staff's throat. The cryptek cannot drop its weapon, because cannot is the highest compliment it pays a tool. He bites the chronometron. The device does not crack. He swallows embarrassment and moves on. The pariah carrier sets the plate. It steadies, preparing to bake the air free of people. Malchus bellows and runs with him because sometimes you do a ridiculous thing on purpose. The Crozius hums in counterpoint to his hum. Together, they hit the carrier from opposite moralities. The construct braces forming into a proof. He trips it with a tail. Malchus plants the Crozius under the plate's lip and pries like a labourer prying up a cobble to make a fire pit. Ro's shot arrives from a window, precise into the actuator his mass hides. The plate tips, it falls. The field blows sideways and convinces a row of statues that they were never carved. The statues accept, the street does not. The pallid Rex chooses then to consider the handler a suggestion. It steps out of its cage without breaking a lock, because locks consult it. The sisters pivot. Their silence grows fingers. The handler sets his jaw and speaks the word that would stop an obedient thing. The Rex is obedient. It stops mid-step, mid-breath, because the Astronomican's faint memory still drifts through the city, like dust and status. It turns its head and watches him. He watches it. In lines of reflected law, they both learn who they could be if the wrong god won. Not yet, Rose says into a private channel, seeing both knives pointed inward. We are not done saving ourselves with other problems. The Cryptek moves into the lane of the pariah field, because that is where he fights without much to annoy him. The Culexus steps too, and their radii gnash like gears. He accepts the insult of becoming less for a heartbeat, skin dull, growth slow, and shoves through because hatred can be an anchor when physics tries to be charity. He meets the Cryptek in a place where neither of them have advantages they wrote. The staff slaps his face and says, "Forget the future there." He bites through the hand that holds it and says, "Be specific." The chronometron whines a warning and is slapped aside by a Crozius that cannot be timed because its owner is rude to clocks. The Cryptek, disarmed, reaches for a tesseract that is not present. He has learned to carry fewer things because the longer fight is heavy. He reaches for contours of certainty in the street and finds rubble and a woman's handprint in dust, and none of this computes. He leaves because pity is not in mathematics, neither is hope. This he wants to chase, and the gayish tightens like a bandolier around a broken rib. Civilians cross the mouth of the alley like fish in a story. He stops because this is his price, and the Emperor did not lie about prices. He roars, and the roar is not big, because big is not allowed in several radii, and that makes him laugh inside. The Tyranid leaper wave hits. They come knowing the angle of his throat. They come having learned his tail's reach. They come smelling of a gland he ate and replaced with absence. He takes the first 40 with the discipline of a butcher teaching an apprentice. Cut here, no, not there, here, do not waste bone. The next 40 he guides under the pariah spill, where their synaptic comfort thins, and they show their true brains, simple and brave. The last 20 he drives into a vent corridor the Mechanicus has prepared, and we say prepared to be kind. Fans become guillotines. The corridor becomes a mouth with knives and laws. He loses nothing he cannot replace except time, and he gives that freely because now it buys lives. The apostle stands again, hands bandaged in script, voice quieter and more holy, because being hurt has improved him. He names him from the steps of a ruined shrine. "We will set a table for you again," he says. "You will eat until you are too polite to hate." "I do not get polite," he says, and decides that is true because it pleases him. Ro calls it. "Now," she says, "we're done here. We hurt them. They will try again. We save the most for later. That is victory." Dravian's chalkboard in the Bastion Ministry has fewer marks than any one of his days deserved. He allows his hand to twitch over a name and choose not to write it, because the man lived. He will drink to that, badly, and he will not tell anyone that the same monster who killed 30 of his people has become part of the reason 60 others have bread tonight. They hold in a way that will count years from now. The bioship pulls back. The Noctilith plate sulks, invite declined. The anathema scripts rust sooner than their author planned because the city learned to scuff them with boots as it goes about living. He stands under a broken arch and breathes ash with the rhythm the bell chose for him. Ro steps up, hair full of grit, rosette burnt around the edges like a cookie too near a fire, and smiles because seeing it here makes her sins lighter. "Conditions," she says, checking the list, because lists are her sacrament. "You spared what was not shooting at you. You accepted the sister Radius and did not eat the handler, however tempting. You submitted to observation between events. You killed enemies as directed and did not eat our dead when I asked." "I am rude," he says, "not cruel." Malchus stands with his helm off and lets the wind take sweat and sanctify it as salt. "Boundaries stand," he says to Ro, to the city, to the sky. So does he. He looks at the pallid Rex, which stands in shadow like a statue that would prefer to be a blade. They meet without moving. It inclines its head just enough to accept a conclusion it does not like. that this will end in one of them no longer being a problem. Not today, not yet, but the law loves endings. The Culexus waits, visor shut, the hole in the world not yawning but present, a promise of consequences if he forgets whose children walk in which streets. He accepts that too. He is learning to like the taste of threats that are honest. Point, he says again, and the word is less jagged now, less like a cut in an argument, and more like a paragraph quietly asking to continue. They do. They clean. They catalogue. They pray in ways that look like triage and in ways that look like kissing a child's hair with hands that still shake. He moves through the city with a shadow of gold edged into his plates that people pretend not to see because they do not want to be happy about this. Night comes, and with night, a smear of aurora where physics has been insulted and makes coloured light to complain. He climbs a hat block and sits because he has earned sitting. Mira climbs too, with a boy on her back who refuses to be carried and yet is. She sets him down. The boy looks at the monster and hides behind her knee without further remark, because fear is a habit, and habits are home. Mira meets his eye and puts a piece of hard bread on the parapet between them, as if feeding a stray dog that is also the city's executioner. "Thank you," she says. It sounds like someone paying a debt without being asked. She repeats something she heard in a chapel where there were no candles left and they made do. Keep both in motion. He looks at the bread and remembers a bell that was not there ringing in a place he was not welcome, and decides that yes, he does love being pointed more than being alone. He pushes the bread back with a claw, because calories are not the point, and politeness is not either. He does not have a word. He lets the act be its own teeth. From orbit, the Necron tomb ship recalibrates patience. Its internal map prints the city as a knot of bad data. A cryptek without a hand inscribes a new theorem. Do not correct the beast. Smother his predicates. In a sterile hall, it arrays tools that feel religious. A bigger pariah plate, a cleaner chronometron, a weapon that suggests you stop wanting. In a chapel that wears the wrong god's red, the apostle binds his fingers with balsam and curses coolly and writes a sermon that reverses a rune. Not rest, but stillness like death without dying. He will find new math to make men love stopping. Identity and temple these phones. The bioship's great mind touches the synapse branch it lost and wonders if there is a mind shaped like hunger wearing resistance in brass. It considers growing a variant that knows how to peel that brass with enzymes of idea. In a pod, hung above a manufactorum by ropes and bad temper, an Assassinorum handler recalibrates algorithms for decision. He logs a refusal to terminate under sanction with a note. Saves more than it kills when pointed. The Culexus cleans its visor as if there were anything on it and performs exercises that teach its field to make kinder knives around sigils it is told to respect. On Terra, a woman in armor the color of late wheat before a burn signs a piece of paper with a pen that was once a sword. She files it under NQ 777. It says, a beast has agreed to hurt what the law hates and will suffer when it forgets. He sleeps for a while because sleep is a hunt too, after carrion, before the next fresh kill. The gesh hums in his dreams like a harp one string out of tune. He chooses to like it because disliking it wastes hate, better spent elsewhere. Morning begins because someone had to. Fires go down to ember and back up to comfort. Voxes clear their throats. Banners that do not exist still manage to hang. He finds himself at the edge of a roof again, looking over a city that learned a new prayer. We can survive if we spend our anger on angles and our grief on names. He drops into the street. Brass lines along his plates catch a grey light and do not glow. He moves. and the simple fact of movement becomes the last image for a child looking up. A monster walking toward a worse thing, with the city's sign scratched onto his back. Across the segmentum, stories travel faster than ships. There is a rumor of an aquila scratched into a reptile that bites gods. Traders love it, priests worry it works. Colonels ask for it. Inquisitors pretend to hate that. Orcs call it the big bitey and hunt where it hunted because fun remains. Tyranids adjust. Necrons recalculate circuits. Chaos writes new antonyms for change, beautiful and slow, and unrolls them like wedding gifts. He will end badly because everything does. He will do numbers in the meantime that add, and that is more than most. He finds a wall and scratches his own mark under the brass. Not a symbol, symbols lie, but a scar that healed without permission. The city will graze fingers on it on their way to work and call it ugliness and feel better, because ugly that protects is what they can trust. He hears Ro on her low band. "We go here next," she says, and the map moves in ways he enjoys. Malchus chooses his men with names he remembers, and that ahead-of-time sorrow is a kind of love. He answers with one word that has become enough and a vow. Point. He moves to obey, and the obedience is another shape he can grind his teeth against.